My name is Nia. I'm 28 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Nia. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
Well, when I was 4, my mom started studying with one of her coworkers and his wife, who were actually also still at that time still studying with their teachers. So students started to study, and that study was my mom. And they have a son who is 3 months younger than me. So it just like worked out perfectly. So we'd like hang out or whatever, and they would study downstairs because we were 4.
Wow, that's fascinating that you studied with a Bible student, or a Bible student, student of the books that Jehovah's Witnesses produce.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating that that's how she was contacted.
Yeah. They worked together for years and years and years. They worked at a VA, and they were both techs, and he has like since moved up because they still live in Louisiana, which is where we lived at the time, where I was from like 3 to 13. And they while they worked together, we actually lived in like the next city over. And so, their congregation was in a different place. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
So the congregation that we first started going to was like a journey away, and that was a congregation that we continued going to. We ended up moving to that city, moving to that town, whatever it is. And I guess it's now a city. They have a Target. So
definition. If it has a Target, it's a city.
For
I love that.
For 5-year-old me, yeah, it certainly clearly hasn't changed. So but now there's a Target that only showed up after we left, and they are still in that same congregation, and we obviously are not, and my mom doesn't live there anymore, but that was where we started. The couple that they studied with, who I loved dearly, went on to go to Bethel, and then maybe do circuit work or something. But the couple that my mom studied with, and more the wife, she is, it kind of like evolved in that direction, but she still worked with him, and they're still really good friends to this day. They studied, and then they got baptized not long before she did either. She wasted no time.
She jumped right into this. Do you know what drew her to it?
Having a 3-year-old as a single mom, and that's, a more recent, like really, clear understanding, but definitely having a child. I lived with my grandparents until I was 3 in southern Mississippi, about 5 hours away from her. And she had gotten the job she was in the Army. She was in the Army, and when she got pregnant, she was discharged and got the job at the VA, and she went to x-ray school there. And so then got a job as a tech there, had this kid, dropped her off at her grandparents' house, visited regularly, but I was mostly there when I was small. And then the house burned down, and there were other cousins there, and we all kind of left and went back to our parents. And so then I moved in with my mom, and she was like full-time single mom, figuring it out, working full-time as well. And just felt like she didn't have direction. I think my grandparents weren't they're very lax Baptist. And so she had kind of had this loose Christian upbringing. But my grandparents also had 6 kids on the south side of Chicago, so they were like busy doing that and not going to church. And so, she was looking for, from what I can tell, and actually fairly recently talked about it, that she was looking for help. She was looking for some kind of direction.
There's, because a lot of times right before someone starts to study, you can see that there are things that happen. Mm-hmm. You said that you were like 3 or 4, and you said that you lived in Louisiana from 3 to 13. So that told me that there was something that was going on before then.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like there was a lot of change and upheaval. And then she finds this thing that says it's going to give her purpose and
And
hope
community.
and community. Yeah.
Huge factor.
Instant community.
Yeah, instant community. You know, like I said, she studied with a couple and they had a kid my age. And so that was just like a perfect, you know, fit. We were like thick as thieves when we were little. So that worked out perfectly. When she did like trainings later on for work, I would stay with them for, you know, a week or two at a time. And so yeah, they were just like a part of life.
Wow. So then you didn't have a huge amount of time before witness life.
No. I remember the last birthday that we celebrated was my third birthday. Notably, I am a Christmas baby. So there's a lot wrapped up in that even now, as just the frustration of the separation of the two. Because I want to celebrate both, but I want them to be on different days.
It's your own day, Jesus.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we celebrated my third birthday in Louisiana. And I was probably I was probably living with her like full time by then. And I remember getting a little tricycle or something, and like some little roller skate things, you know, like the adjustable ones that they used to have. You just like put your shoe in and strap it on. The block coloring. I remember playing with that, and I remember they made like it was my mom and my aunt. It wasn't like a huge, you know, it was like a thing, but it was my mom and my aunt, and there was a tree, and they made a double chocolate cake. And I don't like chocolate, and I didn't like it then. So I remember just kind of like taking a couple bites and just kind of zhuzhing it around the plate.
I don't think 3-year-olds use words like zhuzhing.
Probably not. No, I didn't know it yet, but that's what I was doing.
No, that's fun though. I mean, I'm sorry you got the cake you didn't like.
Yeah.
But just having that memory of, and then of course things change, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's why it was my fourth birthday. Was the last birthday that we celebrated.
Okay. Okay. So
because she got baptized in summer of '97.
Okay.
So my fourth birthday, late '96. That was the end. Okay. For a lot of years, for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what was the worldview that the religion gave you, you know, as you went from a 4-year-old kid celebrating birthdays and just trying to live life to now going into something different? Do you remember how it made you feel, or how it made you see the world around you being so young?
At that moment, it didn't, nothing particularly sticks out from that age. So, you know, later on,
right, but as it went,
when school came into effect, it made things different. I have always been I don't know what the word is. I've always been an extrovert for sure. And so being a small child as a Jehovah's Witness, and my mom was studying, was like, I mean, you're like a kid in a candy shop in terms of getting attention. You know, everybody loved me. I loved everybody back. I was, you know, I'd go around, make my rounds and get candy from people, mostly those like terrible little butterscotch things all old people ever have. I don't know why. But I don't know where they get them. But that was like my jam. You know, I loved going. I loved having the attention. And then because, again, my mom was a single mom, and she working full time. So I had a babysitter during most of the days, and I hated her. She was terrible. And so then going to the Kingdom Hall was like, hello, attention. Hello, people who love me, quote unquote. You know, I got the attention that I didn't get at home. And that is certainly a theme that carried through forever in the journey and in being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. As I got older and went into school, I think there's a lot of conflict because, again, I didn't stop being an extrovert just because I was in school. My teachers all loved me. I remember in kindergarten was probably the hardest of the years, and I had a teacher who I did not like, but I think I largely didn't like her because my mom didn't like her. They had never ever you go to the school for like the first whatever meet the teacher thing in elementary school, where your mom, your parent comes and meets the teacher, and they tell them that you're a Jehovah's Witness and you don't do this, that, and the third, and blah, 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 and make accommodations and all these things. And I think she did that here, as well. But my teacher kind of didn't care. And I was like 5. And so I remember there was a situation where for Christmas they like painted everyone's nose, Rudolph style.
Oh yeah.
And I had gotten my nose painted, and I didn't want to tell my mom, but I did, because a friend of ours picked me up that day, and I was with their kids, another witness friend. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I need to wash this off. And then I don't remember if I did or I didn't, but I definitely told my mom, because I'm incapable. I'm maybe not brutally honest, but it's hard for me to lie, and that was probably the beginning of it. And so I was like, I have to tell you this anyway. And she was both upset with me, but she was really upset with the teacher, and had like an evening meeting with her and was like, you will not be painting my child's nose. She will not be doing X, Y, and Z. And so, but my teacher definitely tried to like sneak in a lot of this holiday-y things. And I, was 5 and did not it was very hard, like standing up for myself, standing up for things I was taught at that time. So, but obviously, you don't give yourself any grace here, because you don't have any grace to give. So, so I was very conflicted, and I was torn, and I felt really bad. And it also began this kind of back and forth of, do I feel bad because of, do I feel bad because I feel like I've hurt my mom, or do I feel like I've hurt Jehovah? Mm-hmm. And that like interchange is also a recurring theme throughout the school years. After that, things got easier. I got, different teachers. I was in the same elementary school the whole journey. So, over time they kind of get to know you. They, see you around, that kind of thing. And they knew. So definitely by, first, second grade, they accommodated. If they were doing something for Halloween, I would do a different project. Or if they were, doing a birthday, I wouldn't like eat a cupcake, which was awful, because obviously, because I was a child and I love cupcakes.
Yeah, what kid doesn't like cake? Well, maybe not chocolate cake.
Yeah, not chocolate cake. Chocolate cake, I was like, whatever, I could care less about. Y'all go ahead and happy birthday. Those like sugar cookies from the store with that like thick frosting, that was the jam, and I was real sad about those. About not having those.
So as you were in school, were you were having to, I guess your mom kind of really became a witness right as you were going into school. So maybe it wasn't a drastic change for you, but as you're not celebrating holidays, as you're not being able to do the same things as the other kids, is the extroverted Nia still able to be extroverted and have friends at school? Or were you feeling like you had to be on your own and be isolated?
Extroverted Nia figured it out. She as a kid, I made very clear kind of distinctions between like school friends and not school friends. And so I didn't hang out with, actually one girl I did, and later on I did have like a couple school friends that I actually still have to this day, that like kind of seeped through the cracks of like the clear, walls and barriers that I had built. I was friends with everyone. I was always teacher's pet, but I was always one of the smartest kids in the class. And so whether people liked me because I was smart and could essentially help them do better, or, they liked me just because I like to think it's both. I certainly had friends in school. I was certainly friends with everyone. Not everyone, but, I was friendly with everyone. And I didn't have any issue with being friends with them in that setting, because there was also this, there's the small bit of like, this is your territory, how they like to say that. And I remember actually in first grade, my teacher, this did not last long, but my teacher would let me read from my book of Bible stories to the class. And people would ask questions about things, and I would be talking about all kinds of, I believe, things. And that didn't last long. And eventually the shift kind of changed to professing that I was a Jehovah's Witness unprompted to, if you ask, I guess I'll say. But that kind of came more in middle school when, the other elementary schools combined, and there was like these people that I didn't know and hadn't grown up with. And I was like, do I want to share this information? It got less and less cool as I got older. But I certainly had friends, and I certainly had friends there, but the friends that I considered friends were were my friends in the congregation. The other like kids that existed were my homies, or my actual homies.
Oh, sure. So, yeah. Those are the ones you're taught are your homies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the only real friends you have. Everybody else is an acquaintance, as they would say.
Yeah, it was people were more of acquaintances in school, and I had no issue with saying that they were, I had like my little trios or whatever, but it would be that they would hang out outside of school and invite me to stuff, and I'd be like, nah, I can't. Insert reason that I've made up at that time here, and that was perfectly fine. And, I certainly remember myself saying, like, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't hang out with people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. And like, what an asshole I was.
We all were. Well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us were. No,
I certainly was. I remember becoming more and more pious throughout elementary school in this feeling of, and I think that I kind of needed that. I think a lot of people kind of need that piety when you are, especially through school, when you're in these situations where you're being presented with what is normal, what is actually normal, and you're fighting with your version of normal. And it's like, you have to hype that up for yourself. You have to have a bigger reason to not hang out with children who are all, your age. In order to justify it, there has to be a bigger reason. It's like, because I am learned and in the Jesus way, in the Jehovah way. So, and you are not, and therefore we can do this thing because we're in this space together, because we all have to be in school. But outside of that, I am going to go back to my people. So
it's sad. It's the us and the them that is created. Yes. And of course, us is always better than them.
For
right.
Sure.
And so okay, so that's a little bit about school. What about, so you mentioned the Kingdom Hall, you did have friends, and being extroverted. So what was life like in the Kingdom Hall for you growing up? Did you enjoy it because you were getting the attention and maybe you like talks and service and stuff? Or how'd you feel about it all?
Yeah, I certainly, I would say that I was ambitious as a female could be. I had friends. I was lucky enough in my youth and when we lived in Louisiana to build really strong friendships with other people who were my age, and that there were other people my age in the congregation, because that is not true of everyone, and certainly not true of like every congregation that I've been a part of. So my mom, had the people that she studied with, and they had their kid who's my age. She has one of her best friends to this day has two kids that I'm right in the middle of, an older boy and a younger girl, that I was really, really close to. We would hang out, they'd like sit around and drink and hang out and whatnot. And the three of us would play, video games and wrestle and do dance-offs and all the things that you do in school. And as we got older, those friendships got kind of blurry, because he and I, like pushing up on the teen years, like kind of had a little thing for each other, and they were like, y'all don't have to separate. So, so he started hanging out with like more of his guy friends, and I started hanging out with her more separately. But then I had another friend in another congregation who I was really, really close to, and another girl entered into our congregation. She was 6 or 7 years older than me, and she became one of my best friends for years. She started studying with someone. She had a shitty home life, and was also kind of looking for something, and came into the Jehovah's Witness fold as in her teens, actually. And so we became really close as well. So I had really, I built really strong relationships that lasted for a very long time, even, long after I moved away from Louisiana. And I loved giving talks. I love attention. So I love being in front of people. I love a good public speaking. I loved talking about the Bible, and I still do. It's a fascinating book, and I love talking to I love talking to people who don't know about it. I'm like, oh, well, these are some of the things that it says because I've had to read it multiple times.
Yeah.
So things like that I loved. When I was younger, I enjoyed service a lot. And as I got older, honestly, throughout my entire journey, I loved going out in service. Later on, I pioneered, and my love of service kind of changed as you forced to get the hours. It's not just about going out and talking to people anymore. There's a quota. So that made it less enjoyable for sure. But I enjoy talking to people. And and service kind of started shifting as I got older, because even when I was younger, I never wanted to knock on my school acquaintance people's doors. Cause I just, you're supposed to, you get ratted out in a lot of ways when you knock on someone that you know's door, in that, now the person that you're with, whether it's your parent, whether it's some other adult person that you've known forever, knows that you are not going around telling people that you're a Jehovah's Witness in school like you're supposed to be doing. So you're wrong for that. And then the person is sitting there and you're trying to awkwardly be like, hi, do you want to read this thing that I haven't read? Because I can tell you I've probably read 3 magazines cover to cover in my life. I never read the magazines. I had no interest in reading the material. I was just here's a Cliff Note version. You want to read the thing. So in that regard, I wasn't a good witness, but it just wasn't, in those situations were not the jam. Anytime any kid came to the door, it was not the jam, but most of the, exactly.
No.
But most of the time, I enjoyed being out in service because it was also a hangout time. As I got older, I'm where do I go and start? Whatever, I'll say that. As I got older, I was homeschooled for the last 3 years of high school. We started moving around a lot, and school was just easier to kind of take with me. So in the very, very early days of online school, which was the last few years of high school for me, I traveled and I took school with me. And so I was no longer able to be extroverted because the only people I'd talk to were the cats or the people in the congregation if I was going out in service. So I went in service a lot, because that was hangout time, and I got to talk to strangers also. But more, it was more service was a hangout time as I got older, and I loved it for that.
No, I totally understand that. I mean, let's face it, going door to door, oftentimes there's nobody home, so it's just a chance for you and whoever you're with to hang out. And if you're a young person and you can find a peer to go with or whatever, or just anybody really, it can be pretty fun. I imagine. Good grief! Just you saying that you were homeschooled and then the whole extrovert thing. Wow, that's terrible. That had to have been really rough.
It was awful. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Those last few years of high school, and I drug it out too because I started living my life. I started doing other stuff, and we were still moving in that first year. So the first year that I was doing it was my sophomore year, and we were in Virginia for a few months and for one of her assignments, and I didn't know anyone, and I didn't. Congregations are not as easy to break into as people like to say they are. you know,
Even for
or
an
as they should
extrovert.
be, even for an extrovert. And so I'm this, you know, 15-year-old, and my mom is at work all day, and I'm sitting at home, and we're in this like townhouse, and there's all of these other townhouses around us. So I hear like the bus, and I hear kids coming home, and I just like, I just want to be friends. I just want to know you. Can I just know? But I couldn't know them because then I had no excuse. You know, if we're not school friends, if we're not going to school together, then there's no reason for us to be talking or dealing with each other. You know, we don't get to be acquaintances anymore. That's me seeking friendship with the world.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have that. So
Absolutely.
So that was definitely hard.
Yeah. So let's touch just briefly on home life as well. So it was, I guess, was it just you and your mom, or did you have any? Okay.
Yeah.
And so you and your mom, what was kind of the temperature of the house? What was, how were things? I mean, I know you said you had a babysitter for a lot of years. Your mom was working a lot. And then, also, so what was the temperature of the house, and how did that translate into the witness world as well? Was she studying a lot with you and stuff like that? So how was life growing up?
Yeah. My relationship with my mom and my relationship and feelings toward my mom, my relationship and feelings toward Jehovah's Witnesses are deeply intertwined. Because obviously she brought it in. We are the only ones in the family who were Jehovah's Witnesses. My grandma was not about it. She certainly was like, what are you hanging out with that cult for? And my mom was like, they're not a cult. And my grandma slowly was like, okay, fine, whatever. But at the same time, my mom certainly pulled away from the family. And to this day, she doesn't really interact with her family. And I still talk to people, and I still keep in touch with people. But she does not at all, because she has her family. And so our growing up was, when I was younger, when I was smaller, when I was easily, I was more malleable. There was not much conflict. There was not much, other than the Rudolph nose situation. There, obviously there every now and then there were, bits and, single mom, only child, struggles, which is a lot. And there's a good amount of pressure involved, in that, but in the expectations and assumptions of not embarrassing your parent, that I was reminded to not do. There was a girl in the congregation who got disfellowshipped when I was she was in her late teens, and I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 or something like that. And I remember, and she was also, her dad was not a witness, but he was in her life to an extent. He lived in another state, but he was, they knew each other. And, it was mainly just her and her mom. And she had other family who were witnesses, but who were in the congregation. But she got disfellowshipped. And I remember my mom distinctly one day, after it happened, I think we were in the car on the way home after it had been announced. And she was like, don't you ever embarrass me the way that she embarrassed her mother. And I was like, okay, cool. Let me hold on to that forever. So I did. And so the expectation, like I said earlier, it's like, is it that I don't want to upset Jehovah, or is it that I don't want to upset my mom? And I think more often than not, it was the latter. And so our relationship changed because it was, like I said, I was younger, I was more malleable. When you're small, it's like, I'll just do whatever because I'm a child and I just go places. And as I get older, though, I definitely, that spirit of independence really took hold. And I was always a fairly, I guess, probably maybe a little more driven child than others. I learned how to read very young, because my mom was like, I'm not going to keep reading you all these things. So you're just going to learn how to do it. And I was like, okay, cool. So I learned how to read when I was 4. And I took the initiative in a lot of things for myself. Partially because she was not necessarily around to do it. I had the babysitter for the, year, whatever, before school started and before we moved to this other town. And then started school there, and I went to daycare through elementary school, after school, for a few hours as well. And so I had like my own little daycare life, with my little daycare friends. And we all grew up together as well, because we all went to the same daycare for years. And so, and at one point, actually, the daycare was taken over by a witness family from our congregation. And so I knew all of them, and, knew all the kids. You just have like your little kid life, and you're just like doing your little thing. And so my mom was, she was around, certainly when I got older, when we started moving around when I was 13, and she started doing contract work. We moved to different states for generally like 3 to 6 months at a time. And so, which is a very short amount of time. And we started that when I was like 13 or 14, just in 8th grade. And our relationship really shifted then, because it went from having this whole congregation that I've known my entire life to now we're in these new places. And different things started to emerge, as it was literally just the two of us. I loved Gilmore Girls growing up, and I always wanted to have a very Gilmore Girls relationship, but we certainly did not have that. And it changed because I got baptized when I was 13. That's probably an important note. I got baptized when I was 13 in 2006. And it was just before we started moving, summer just before we started moving around. And so that definitely shifted our relationship from what I felt, I guess, was a more mother-daughter kind of situation. And it became a sister-sister kind of situation. So while the hierarchy was enforced when she felt like it needed to be enforced, it certainly, there was a responsibility that was placed on me that like I had to keep myself in the truth, quote unquote. Okay. So it was no longer her responsibility. So I remember her studying, like we would do the watchtower together sometimes, not often, but sometimes, before I got baptized. We certainly did not have like a family study, any kind of regular family study. We certainly did not do any kind of like regular study together. And I would go to friends' houses, and like they would do study together, and I'd be like, okay, this is weird, but all right, I guess, but like, I guess it's what we're supposed to be doing. But I would never say that, that we didn't do that. I wasn't gonna embarrass her. I wasn't gonna rat her out and be like, you're not doing your spiritual head duty situation. And once I got baptized, the spiritual head duty kind of like went out the door, and she was like, you're your spiritual head, bye. So, essentially she like left me to figure it out myself, while never having really taught me how to do it. And I didn't, I was not driven to figure out how to deeper immerse myself into this. It was enough to feel, the guilt, to feel all of the ways that the cult makes you feel. And, I didn't like need to do further study into why I needed to feel that way. But as I got older, the sister thing definitely changed. And when we, moved to our first assignment in California, she went out first and, met the congregation, and we had some friends there, but we never really deeply got in. And and it was hard to tell. I did a lot of tiptoeing, I guess, with my mom. It was hard to tell what I was supposed to be doing on my own and what I wasn't. I remember there was a Sunday meeting. She slept in. I'm gonna tell all my mom's business on this. She was sleeping in, and I got up to get ready to go to the meeting, and I called someone to give me a ride. I think she had worked the night before or something. And so I didn't think anything of it. I was like, cool, someone, I can go to the meeting on my own. And so I called one of the sisters in the congregation, and she was like, cool, I'll totally pick you up, whatever, not a big deal. And she asked me about my mom, and I was like, oh, I think she's not feeling well or something. I made some stuff up. I was like, I can cover for you. I can do this. It's not a big deal. And I thought absolutely nothing of it. And my mom got up, told me to cancel it, told me to cancel the ride, and was like, I forget how it was said, but she was mad at me because I made her look bad, and that she wasn't the one. She wasn't going to the meeting. And I was like, I just said this thing, and it fixed the thing. But she was upset that she wasn't doing it. And I remember if we even ended up going to the meeting after all of that, like, I don't even know if it happened, but there's certainly, obviously there's a big sense of presentation in the cult. So if she thinks that she looks bad, or if you actually do look bad, that's a much bigger problem than whatever actually might be happening. So we had some of those situations, and certainly presented something of a united mother-daughter, sister front in the congregation. People thought we were much closer than we were, and as I like moved into my teen years, there was a more discontent brewing between the two of us, and there was more separation of life. There was more that really started in my later teens. Once we stopped moving around, we moved to a few different states throughout, from like 14 to maybe 16, or 13, 14 to 16, 17. And we ended up moving from Louisiana to central Pennsylvania, because she had gotten an assignment there. She liked the congregation a lot. It's a similar, how could I forget this? One of the biggest reasons that we moved, that I didn't necessarily know about at the time, but damn, I'm really telling her business. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So she don't talk to me, so it's fine. There was a situation in Louisiana involving one of her coworkers who was very married, and she had an affair with him and was reproved. Was publicly reproved. Yes, I see your face right now. And was publicly reproved, okay, when I was like 13, maybe 14, somewhere in here. And I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I remember like finding a note or something that reading and like having an idea. And also she would like leave the house a lot, in the evening, and come back and be like, I was at the liquor store. And I'm like, ain't nobody at the liquor store for 2 hours, but all right, whatever, like you do you. So, like it's down the street, but okay. So, you lie as much as you can when you're on your dirt. And I remember reading this letter and later on, her getting publicly reproved. And she never really talked to me about like all the details that happened until a while later. But I remember feeling so guilty, and my guilt was wrapped up in, I felt like I had read this letter, like I had a good sense that like something was going on, and I didn't tell on her. And that got me for a long time. I felt a lot of guilt around that for a number of years. I felt like I should have done something, like I should have said something, because you're supposed to, if you see something, say something, if you think something's going on. But I would have, according to their process, I should have, confronted her first about it, but she was never, she was not going to tell me about it. So so that was a huge factor in terms of her, I think, moving around, taking the contract job in the first place. And then when we ended up in Pennsylvania, like moving away from the situation, I think was a latent, function of that move that I didn't necessarily know about or think about at the time, but later on, shortly later on, realized like, oh, that dude might have like something to do with it. So, yeah.
I gotta say, it's fascinating. It's Nia. Don't you dare ever embarrass me like that girl embarrassed her mom. And then, mom went and did it to herself.
Yeah.
And
I'm still with the guilt.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because what I'm hearing here, and there are certain, I guess, there's certain patterns that arise in a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses' lives. And that is, for one, you were like a little adult. You're made to be responsible for things that you probably shouldn't have been responsible for at an early age. But then also, and I know some of that's the single mom thing. And, you did need to step up in some ways. That's hard in its own way, and you got to survive. And I understand all that. But you're also being made responsible for your mother's image, just like you're being made responsible for Jehovah's image. Yep. And what you're saying is it's that style over substance. Mm-hmm. When that, I believe it was a girl who embarrassed her mom by getting disfellowshipped.
Yeah.
what you saw in your mom is she wasn't concerned for that girl who got disfellowshipped, and she wasn't concerned about any of the people involved. She was concerned about appearances. And Jehovah's Witnesses play style over substance. They don't, it's just like all the people all the child sexual abuse issues they have. They care more about not bringing reproach upon Jehovah's name, which just means keeping up appearances, than they do protecting children or actually helping the people who have been devastated and hurt by this thing. And that's what happens in a largely narcissistic organization. They're enamored with their own reflection. They love themselves. They love their own reflection more than anything else. And so that's what they need to keep up. They're not concerned about you as an individual, how you feel, what might be going on in your internal life. It's just about how do you look on the outside, and just don't embarrass me. That's not love, that's control. And that's what narcissists do. I don't know your mom. Not saying she's a stone cold narcissist or something, but there's a lot of narcissistic traits inside the cult, a whole lot.
It's this hard, our relationship, because there are plenty of times where we're very close.
Sure.
Because obviously we are. She's my mom. It was just us for a long time, and in so many of those contracts, so many of those assignments, we try to go to the Kingdom Call, or we tried to, establish relationships with people. But one, it's hard. And two, I remember one of the assignments, we probably went to one meeting in a month. And honestly, I was totally fine with that. I was cool. I don't have to do this thing, because as I got older, I was it became in certain times, it became much more of a chore than anything, going, having to go to the trouble, go to the meeting and meet these new people and deal with this struggle, trying to meet people and trying to interact and, all of trying to build these relationships, because Jehovah's Witnesses are obviously not as friendly as they like to say they are. So surprise, surprise. And so I was just cool, we was not going to do it. At a certain point, that embarrassment, that, I don't know. We became very lax in a few of those assignments. Because
did you and your mom ever have fun together? Did you ever go?
Yeah,
so did you all? I want to make sure we
don't paint her as a complete villain. No. We had.
I guess because honestly, a lot of our lives as Jehovah's Witnesses with our families did revolve around the cult. It was all cult activities for a lot of people. But I guess what I'm asking is, did you ever go to a park and play? Did you ever go to the zoo or ever go to an amusement park or the movies? Regular people, fun, bonding experiences.
We did. We had a good amount of that. Growing up in Louisiana, we certainly did a lot of, there were congregation activities, but like I said, I had a lot of friends in the congregation, and she was friends with their parents, as all kids are. You're friends with your parents' friends' kids. So, and luckily we liked each other. So there was a boardwalk that opened up when I was younger, that they built. It's huge, outdoor kind of shopping restaurant situation in Louisiana. We would go there a lot. We would go to the movies a lot. I did a lot of making my own fun in that, I would call my friends, and we would one of my best friends, we would coordinate every weekend. We would stay at one of the other person's house. So our parents would meet, and she was in a congregation 45 minutes away. So they would meet in the middle and then take us back to the separate houses, and we would like stay with them for a weekend. And, we I did stuff like that, but then together we would, when we lived in Pennsylvania, we're not, no one's celebrating birthdays, nobody's celebrating Christmases, but when we lived in Central Pennsylvania, we were only a few hours away from New York City. So for maybe 2 or 3 years in a row, it is also a Christmas vacation. So 2 or 3 years in a row, we would go to New York for Christmas, essentially, on Christmas, not for Christmas, which was also my birthday. We would go to New York, just the two of us, and we'd hang out for a few days in Manhattan and go shopping and look at stuff and whatnot. We went to see The Lion King on Broadway. We would go, we'd go to movies. We certainly did things together. And which is why outside of the cult, I love my mother. I would love for us to have, we could have that Gilmore Girls relationship that I wanted. And sometimes we did, because just the two of us, it just, it happens. But as I got older, certainly my exertion of independence and her, I don't know, perception or definition of what that independence should look like, kind of diverged.
Well, my guess is she believes it should look like her.
Yes, certainly.
Right.
And for a while it did, and in many ways it did, but then in certain ways it didn't after a period of time.
Can I ask, so just to go back, you said you got baptized at 13. I remember you throwing that detail in. What prompted that? Was there anything that prompted that? What was baptism?
Yeah.
What was that for you?
So like I said, I was ambitious, and I wanted to move up in the cult as much as I could. I wanted to be, the most that I could ask for was to be a missionary, right? That was because we were traveling, and so I was like about to travel. I was like, cool, I'm down to move. I can like go somewhere and be somewhere and immerse myself somewhere. I can talk to people. I'm adaptable. I would say the biggest gift that my upbringing, including but not limited to the cult, is adaptability. And so I wanted to do all the things, and you got to get baptized to do it, to start entry level. That's your high school diploma right there. So I got baptized at 13. There are a few things. People around me were getting baptized. Obviously, that's around the age. The person that I mentioned earlier, who had come into the call as a teen, who became one of my best friends for many years. She was worldly, as they say, in a negative way. And my mom was hesitant about us spending so much time together while she was still studying. And I was like, this is perfectly fine. Like, we're not doing anything crazy. She's studying, but like, this is a 15, 16-year-old who has taken the initiative to study the Bible on her own, apart from her entire family. Like, that said something to me in terms of like where her heart and mind was. And so I was like, nah, this is my homie and we're going to do this. And that person didn't fight for me the same way that I fought for them later, but pish posh. So she got baptized though. And in the instant of her getting baptized, my mom was like, cool, you're good. You can hang out with her. Like, this is fine. I have no issue with that. And I was like, oh, this is what it takes to get your approval. So that was certainly a part of it. Had friends who were getting baptized. There was certainly a little bit of pressure mounting from my mom, about me getting baptized. She's like, oh, well, it'd be great if you got baptized. And years later, she had the nerve to be like, well, I felt like you were a little too young to get baptized. And I was like, bitch, what? Like, what? Why did you say that? And she was, when I said, why did you say that? She was like, well, it wasn't my decision to make. And I was like, what? Like, why would you, my parent, why didn't you say something? Okay.
Since when were your decisions your own?
Like, thank you. I was like, okay, cool. Good to know. Thank you. Could have saved us all a lot of heartache. But it's whatever. If you would like open your mouth this one time, but okay. But at the time, the words actually
she said, it's easy to say that in retrospect,
exactly.
to act like you knew a thing that you didn't know.
Right. Because at the time, the words, what she was spitting was, you should, it would be great if you got baptized. She's very, very good at the manipulation. And so I was like, okay, cool. But I think one of the biggest things that really pushed me, I had a dream, had an Armageddon dream. I used to have a lot of Armageddon dreams. And which I now know is not, people in the cult have lots of Armageddon dreams. It's a very stressful, scary time. The Great Tribulation was like, they had you thinking you were gonna get put in concentration camps again. Like, they're coming for you specifically. Like, the victim mentality is strong and powerful. And so I remember having an Armageddon dream and being destroyed because being destroyed, being aggressively murdered by a fireball, because I knew, quote unquote, the truth, but I had not acted on it. And so my mom was saved and I was not. And so being baptized gave me the approval that I wanted from her. It did not ensure my salvation, as we know, but it gave me a little more support. And it also, being baptized, changed my getting baptized before we started moving around kind of changed my interactions with people, or maybe not change my interaction with people, but it made it so that I continued compartmentalizing my relationships between my like school people and congregation people. It like further solidified the need to do that, because now I also, have this additional weight on me of the name. So yeah, and I remember being so proud and so happy that I got baptized that day. I also there was a reporter around, and I got like my picture in the paper and got interviewed about being baptized, about being a witness, about like what it meant to me. And essentially what I said was that it's a protection so that I don't fuck it up. Little did I know years later I would fuck it up.
Yeah, just think about that whole it's a protection thing. What they're telling you in that moment is that they are hooking you to something to basically extort you emotionally, so that you can never change your mind. Yeah. Like they're even it's one of the things that kills me about the cult, and that is that they pretty much on a lot of levels, they tell you what they're doing to you, but make you think it's good. And it's just such a mind fuck that they can spin. They're such spin masters when it comes to everything. Yeah. It's for your protection that we are locking you into this thing, to where we are going to make sure that if you ever deviate from this one path, you are going to lose everything. Yeah. It's a little not protection.
It locks you into this system where if you ever leave or you change it makes it so that the option of changing your mind is not an option. It just takes that option away, because to lose your social circle, the idea of it is one thing, but the reality of it is a very different thing. And so and all you have at the moment is the idea. And and I certainly I don't think I would have said that I got baptized because I love Jehovah. Like that was like not at all like that. He was relevant. He was relevant. I got baptized because I wanted my mom to accept me. I wanted her to be proud of me. I wanted her to to see me as worthy, and baptism seemed like the way to do it. It didn't seem like it. It was. It 1,000% was. There's no question about that.
I'm just writing down these words you just said because it just struck me. You wanted your mom to accept you, to be proud of you, and you wanted to feel worthy.
Yep.
And like all of that is about like trying to earn somebody's love.
Yeah.
It's like, I've got to do something to earn your love, instead of just being acceptable and worthy of love because you're her daughter.
Yeah.
It's like we were always trying to earn Jehovah's love. We were always trying to earn the love of the congregation, the love of our parents. And it was exhausting. There was no default attachment. It was an attachment that could only be earned and could just as equally be lost.
Yeah, exactly. And it was lost just as quickly as I went down in that water and came up. It was lost just in that announcement, and that, in those phone calls where you got to tell everybody you're getting disfellowshipped. Yep, it was just as quickly gone. And yeah, anyway, that's shit, but we'll get there.
Yeah, so you got baptized. You've kind of gone into a little bit of how life went. Obviously your mom started doing contract work, things started changing. So does that mean for you, you got baptized, did you get to, I know eventually you said something about pioneering, because I really appreciated your point about the quota, taking the joy out of it for you.
Yep.
But from a young age, did you get, because you said you were ambitious, did you get any immediate gratification from getting baptized? Did you get to auxiliary pioneer or
Yeah,
do
I auxiliary
something quickly?
pioneered the next month.
Did you? Okay. So you went right into it then. All right.
I was in it. We were trying to do, getting the hours in before me and that friend. Before we who had gotten baptized, and gotten my mother's approval as a result. Just before we auxiliary together that first month immediately, and later on definitely auxiliary, plenty of like school breaks, plenty of just whenever, and even if I wasn't necessarily, even if I didn't like sign up, I was like out in service a lot, especially in those later teen years, because I have shit else to do. Besides, I wouldn't go anywhere. I was sitting around doing the work, doing the schoolwork sometimes, and calling people up for rides, and being deeply involved in the congregation. So let's see. So there's some teen years, and we're traveling, and blah 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 happens, and yeah. So we end up in Pennsylvania, next big time, and we're in like deep in Amish country. And it's like, kind of like a Northern Bible Belt on its own. People are pretty religious. It's very conservative. These days, it's pretty Trumpy. I went back relatively recently and was like, damn, I like missed it when I was younger, but I was like, oh damn, like all these people looking at me funny. So we ended up there, and it was an interesting time because my mom stopped traveling and she took a job working at a hospital about 40 minutes away, working like 3 to 11. So she would miss the midweek meeting regularly for a good chunk of time. This is just before I graduated high school. So we, during that time, she bought a townhouse, and my friend that she accepted, we'll call her C. And I got my mom to essentially to take her in. I was working really hard. She was still in Louisiana, and so she moved up to Pennsylvania, and she stayed with us because we had a 3-bedroom townhouse, and there were only 2 of us, and 2 cats. And so she moved in and moved up and went to school, and started getting her life together because her family situation was trash. And we continued to be very, very close. Another friend ended up moving into our basement once my mom got that finished. Another friend, really, my mom had another very close friend in the congregation in Pennsylvania who had 4 kids, and one of her daughters had been disfellowshipped has been disfellowshipped. It's her 3rd time being disfellowshipped, and the 2 of us are still we are very much still in contact. Because now she got disfellowship for the 3rd time right around when I got disfellowship, the 1 time. And so she ended up moving in. She was going through a divorce, and she ended up moving into our basement. She was like an active witness at that time. And so the 4 of us lived together in the house, and my mom was working nights or evenings. And so I was finding rides. I, had a ride for the meeting every week. I was out in service constantly all of my own doing, all of my own creation. I was really deeply involved in the congregation, and knew everyone knew me, was there for a while. There were not many kids in my congregation at that point, not many people my age. There were 4 boys who were probably 3 or 4 years older than me, down to one who's like a couple months younger than me. So those were like, the boys were my peers. There were 4 brothers, and they were my peers. And, it's not appropriate for you to be hanging out with these people. So we knew each other, and we'd like hang out in these group, and like congregation things. This congregation, I would say, was very active in terms of, and probably still is in terms of having, congregation picnics and like doing functions and whatnot. Pretty close-knit congregation, and the people who have been there, have been there for people who like lived and grew up there and whatnot. So, and I think virtually all of them are still there. I think one of the boys was at Warwick, last I heard, 7 years ago. So that was So we did that, and that's what Where to go here? Oh, so around my later in high school, my mom, because she had been working nights and I had been, actively doing doing these things myself, she was starting to get depressed. And she ended up quitting her job. And in that time, I certainly, like you said, there's a single parent factor to me having to grow up fast, but there's also there was a shift in another shift in our relationship where that I to an extent kind of became the parent, and I felt this responsibility to take care of her and make sure that she was okay, spiritually and otherwise. And she relied really heavily on me in those years for a lot of support. She felt like she was going to fall out of the quote unquote truth. And because she was missing all these meetings, she wasn't able to go out and service as much as she wanted to. She wasn't, keeping up with her study or whatever. She felt like really weak. And I was like, okay, well, you gotta do something about it. What she decided to do about it was to quit her job with no backup plan, because of course. So
will provide. I mean, isn't that what they're told though? If your right eye is making you stumble, tear it out, right? Yeah. Like people quit their jobs with no backup plan all the time just because they can't make a meeting, and then it often goes very badly.
It certainly does. So she quit her job with no backup plan. I do not believe that the Jehovah will provide mentality was prevalent in the household. It was truly what the fuck do we do now? And what we did then was I was planning on going down. My best friend, who I'd grown up with, who did like the weekend back and forth, was graduating because we're the same age. And so we went down to Louisiana to see her graduate, to see some friends. That was when I found out about the Target in the town. It did not exist there before, but it did exist when I was 18 and didn't live there anymore. And so we went down for that. We drove back up, and she came back and hung out with us for a bit after, I think. And my mom was just unemployed and was looking for a job. And I think she didn't necessarily want to go back to doing contract work, but that is what she did end up doing. And in that time, she stopped paying her mortgage. And I was working. I had gotten a job. I'm a hardcore hustler. So still am. So I had at 17, I had 4 little side gigs and a restaurant job, and was going out in service a bunch. I wasn't pioneering yet, but I was out a lot. And I was paying bills. I was like, cool, pay for this electricity, pay for this gas, pay for this cable. We're going to pay for these things because now we'll have this money to do it because she ain't got no job. And that certainly set me off on a survival mode in terms of finances. And me and finances obviously now have a very complicated relationship. But I was certainly a provider in that way. And I would not say that she was using this time of struggle to go out and service a lot and to do a bunch more in the congregation, which assumedly was the reason why she quit her job in the first place. I remember her laying in bed all day long as a depressed person does. So, and not necessarily seeking any help or treatment for that. I will say that while I know that a lot of witnesses scoff at the idea of therapy and regard mental health as a spiritual weakness, it was never that in our household. My friend who was in the basement, who had gotten divorced, had been in therapy for a long time. And so I was familiar with therapy in that regard, whereas in that people go for that, her and her ex-husband had been in counseling and that kind of thing. So I was familiar with therapy. I didn't see anything wrong with it. And nothing had ever been explicitly told to me that therapy was wrong or that you shouldn't do it. But we didn't do it. So it just didn't happen. And so she eventually went back to work, and we had to, and the house, this was in when did I graduate? This was 2011-ish. So coming off the recession, but still financial struggles. The house eventually, the bank, did eventually take it back. But in that kind of in between, she, went off to another assignment, and everybody had to move out of the house because the mortgage hadn't been paid in a long ass time. So, and the bank could come at any point. So that led to these few months of extreme stress where both, all the three people remaining had to move out. There was an opportunity where me and my friend C were looking at, moving in together, getting an apartment, had looked at it, we're both working, we're, figuring it out. And my mom really, the struggle with the narcissism in my mom is that it's hard to tell whether she would be this way if she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness also, like whether she'd just be this way anyway, because there are things that are completely, outside of the cult that there are things you would say, like in this situation where she really was very like manipulative, like awful in making us feel like moving in together would be a bad idea. And that we would inevitably fail at it. And so
why did she give a reason?
I can't remember exactly, but I remember my mom definitely like oftentimes says very horrible things to me, would say very like, going with that, like trying to be proud, trying to be worthy, kind of like things that would be just to tear down said ambition, to tear down said independence.
Oh, yes.
And so, and not just, like I said, not just in regards to the cult, just in things that she didn't necessarily want me doing. And so, or she, for whatever reason, whether she gave one or not. And so I don't remember exactly what the reason was, but I remember the outcome was that. And I remember after having this conversation, my friend, who I had been saying like, yeah, she like says some really like shitty fucked up things sometimes, her like sitting there and being like, wow, did she really just like say all of that? Like, was that really like the interaction that we had? And I was like, oh, yeah, that happens. That goes down sometimes. And after this whole, the whole mortgage, we're all trying to move out and blah, blah, blah. I remember talking to my mom and her being like, just before we were all trying to move out, trying to figure out, what to do about this whole, about the house and whatnot. And, saying, me being like, yeah, I guess, it might have been a good idea if we moved in together. Mom was like, yeah, I guess I really kind of messed that one up, huh? And I'm like, it was like the only bit of acknowledgement that she maybe had any part in doing anything wrong ever, probably in my entire life that I can remember. So that was, that was a moment. But we all ended up having to move out of the house, and my mom was like out of state somewhere. I think she was like on the Cape working and in Massachusetts. And she would call me regularly, like, have you found a new place? Have you found this, that, and third, blah, blah, blah. Because now that she was working again, we created this arrangement where she would pay the rent and I would pay like everything else. And so when she wasn't working, when she didn't have an assignment, she would stay with me and we would just be roommates in this 1-bedroom apartment for like these small periods of time. And so, so that like worked out fine.
All right, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So you were living apart from your mom at that point, and she would pay for your rent, but you would pay for the rest of the stuff.
Yes.
And,
so
okay.
Yeah. Once I found a place, moved out of the house and just like left the house there. I found a spot. She would cover the rent and I would pay, utilities, gas, like the rest of my life. And so that was the arrangement for a while. And I lived in the apartment that I moved out into when I was 18. I lived in that apartment for 3 years. Everyone who lived in the house found a place to live. And actually one of the people still lives in that exact same apartment to this day, and she loves it. So, she actually probably have to move out soon though, because she has a small child. It's a tiny place. So, but that's whatever.
Life changes.
Exactly. So I lived in that apartment from like 18 to 21, and I loved that first apartment. But that being under her thumb financially was certainly was like the next level of control that she had over me for a number of years, and that control that she very much exercised. If I was doing something that No, that's not how I'm going to say that. What I will say next is after I finished school, I had gotten a job and I ended up managing at a restaurant. I worked in restaurants for 10 years, and I had a job and I was working. Eventually, I finished school, and I eventually pioneered, and that was obviously it's her goal to pioneer. And therefore I had to go achieve it. So, so I became a pioneer when I was maybe 19 or so. And a friend of mine and I had always wanted to go to pioneer school. My reason for going to pioneer school or becoming a pioneer, not because I loved that, not because I loved Jehovah, but because growing up in Louisiana, our Kingdom Hall hosted the pioneer school every year. And we would often, for many of those years, we would have a pioneer stay with us. And I always loved it. I always loved having like another person in the house, not because they were a pioneer, just because they were another person. And I'm an extrovert. I love to talk to people. So I was like, hello, stranger in my house. 8-year-old me, like, hi, I love this. My mom works all the time and you're here and I'm so excited.
It's like I have an audience. It feels good at 8 years old. I'm sure.
It really did. So I loved Pioneer School, and we had a lot of really good, great people stay with us. Remember one year we had 2 people stay with us, and that was like the jam. But I remember one year we had a sister stay with us, and she was super depressing. And the next year we did not have anyone stay with us. She was going through. She needed to go to therapy. She was going through some stuff. She was really, really sad. But yeah, I loved having the pioneers. I loved having people in the house. I loved all of that. So I loved Pioneer School. And we'd go pick them up, and there'd be like leftover food, and I was like, yes, let me get these after school snacks. Like everything about it was just very conducive to being a child. And so I always wanted to go to Pioneer School. I had heard about it, and it's obviously the next step in my ladder climbing in the cult. So the best that I could do, would be a missionary or to go to Bethel. Like those were the options. And so, I became a pioneer. My best friend, I had, become very close with someone else in my congregation in Pennsylvania. My friend in Louisiana had become a pioneer, and she came up at one point and stayed with me, and we, were going out in service together. And so my friends were pioneers, and the people in the congregation I'd become close to, because my mom is now gone. She had gone from having this job where she's gone from the midweek meetings and not in service a lot, and I'm doing a lot. So I was presenting in the congregation for both of us for a long time. I was repping the household. So I became very close to, the pioneers, who were all like, 40-some-year-old white ladies. And I'm like their kid, and I'm just hanging out with them all the time because I'm, 15. What else am I going to do with my life? So I'm at their houses, like we're eating together, their husbands are elders, we're all hanging out. Sometimes as we got older, like the boys would come over, and so there were a couple like meeting houses. We would just go to like one of this like pioneer elder households and just like hang out at their house. And so I would do that a lot, and I was in service, and my mom, was not around, and she went from, like I said, the job situation and not being there to then like actually leaving and going to do contract work somewhere else. And she was certainly making those meetings and service there. And so, that made her happy. And so she was doing her thing, and she had her own little life over there and her friends out there. So, and I had my own little life out here, or in Pennsylvania. That's not where I am now. But in that time, I also had, you go from school friends to work friends. Work friends are a different box. I had to like create a new compartment for them. So people definitely knew that I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I would say that, but I would also do things that were not witnessy things. As you and the viewers and listeners may have noticed, I enjoy a colorful language, colorful vocabulary, and I have for many years, for a very long time. I remember like being in 5th grade before middle school, and someone said shit or something on the playground, and I was like, oh my God. And she was like, we're going into middle school, we're gonna have to learn how to cuss. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll have to figure that out. And so I did. And so I've been enjoying colorful language outside of the witness world for a very, very long time. And
did you feel a lot of shame for that as a kid?
Nope.
Okay. Okay.
It did not bother me. And I had other witness friends who certainly who cussed, not at the Kingdom Hall and not around certain people. You know, you really learn like, with the adaptability. I think one of the keys is you learn who you can do what around in any situation in life outside of the cult, especially like in the cult, it's very important, you know, the stakes are higher, but in life you learn, you know, who you can do what around, how you know, where you need to be, you know, you learn to become an ambivert in, you know, in whatever situation. So I certainly had a colorful language. And why did
so did that come from work or back to the work friend?
Yes, back to work. So I'd be at work and I'm like cussing all over the place, and we're in a restaurant. So like there's that, and, you know, there's like sexual tension rolling around everywhere. I had like me and one of the cooks had a little thing for each other, like all of these different things. So I was like not really like exuding witness behavior, but I was like saying that I was, and that's kind of where like just like, you know, back in school, when you knock on like a schoolmate's door and they're like, clearly you weren't telling people that you were a witness, but you are, and you're like not behaving. So the label became a little harder to wear, harder to, you know, harder to hold, harder to uphold. You're supposed to be like representing, but I was like, I'm not trying to really like represent in the situation. And that kind of started the beginning of some, I guess, I would not have said it at the time, but I guess that would probably be the beginning of some version of a double life. And so not as explicitly as I thought that, you know, double lives would be, where it's like, oh, you got a boyfriend over here on the side. I didn't have a boyfriend on the side, but I definitely was like making out people in closets. So I guess if we're calling it a double life, I was definitely doing that. And I had friends who I would hang out with outside of work, and my mom certainly didn't like that. And the struggle of that time was that I was living alone most of the time. It was just me and my cats most of the time. And so when she would come around every couple months for a couple weeks, it was like rules were different. Rules existed suddenly. And she was like, you need to be home at such and such time. You need to do X, Y, and Z at such and such time. And I was like, who are you? Why are you like, what? Where you come with all these rules? When, you know, the entire time that she had been doing that job where she was like working, you know, in the evenings, I'm alone. I'm like, I'm just like living my life. And so I was generally hanging out with witnesses, but I could have been doing anything. And she would never have known. And so when she came, you know, when she would come back, and I'm like 19, 20 at this point, all of a sudden she wants to be a parent. That obviously led to lots of contention, especially after an entire life of having to be a little adult. I would say probably like upon my baptism and then subsequent, you know, a couple months later, we started moving. Around that time, I certainly did not look at her as a parent anymore. Because I don't, and I, you know, and I think my feedback was that it didn't feel like she was looking at me as a daughter. It was like like we were on equal ground, it seemed, as far as witnesses, because we have equal things to lose if shit turns south. So I was like, when she came along and, you know, tried to invoke a time that I need to be home, or she was like, she actually said, on more than one occasion, I would go and I would hang out with my work friends. One of my friends lived like right down the street. And so every now and then I'd go like have a beer with her or something. And I didn't really think much of it. And, you know, like obviously I'm not trying to witness to, I'm just trying to like live my life. And I would say that it probably at 21 was really when things happened, because I was like, once stuff is legal, I'm going to do it. So, and all I wanted to do was drink. And I had been drinking with my mother since I was 14. So this didn't really seem like a big deal. But it was all about the company you keep. So I remember going to my friend's house one day, and my mom, before I had left, in one of her, you know, bits in my home, saying that if you, how did she say it? Essentially, like if you like aren't back, or like if you keep hanging out with these people, I'm going to tell the elders. And I was like, oh, being some real threatening now. Okay, cool. And definitely the elders being called was a threat on more than one occasion. And we all know what that means, you know. We all understand the danger of that, you know, the possible dangers of that.
You mean the protection?
The protection, yes. They're calling to protect you from yourself and your decisions and stuff.
Protection.
So So I remember like definitely those nights. I remember nights that I remember like being out one night with like at this friend's house. Again, she lives down, a mile away, and I'm of age, I'm 21, and we're like having a couple beers. It's, not a big thing. A couple people come over, other people who I work with, other people who, mind you, this is a small town. So I had gone to a little bit of high school, middle and high school there. So I knew a lot of people anyway. And so I knew a lot of people who went there. And it's definitely one of those places where like you live and grow up and you stay there. So I knew, we had all been there for a long time. They had all known each other for a long time as well. So I'm like hanging on people that I've known, and I'm like, these aren't like bad people, what I would consider bad people. Like, I don't know, if like somebody pulls a needle out, I would be like, oh, maybe I should go. Like, maybe this is actually not my scene. But that never happened, because that doesn't happen. There's always the picture in the, I remember like someone else pointing this out on a previous episode, but there's always the picture in the awake that you remember of what a worldly situation, quote unquote, looks like, where there's like a girl sitting there with like janky hair that's been dyed horribly, and like some kid sitting there crying, and some dude passed out with a beer bottle and a needle in his arm. And it's like, actually, like literally no one does that. That is not anyone's reality at all. I remember like the day, in the DARE program that you have in school, where they're like, people are going to offer you drugs. They're really going to try to push them down your throat. And I'm like, no one has ever done that. And I wish someone would offer me some free weed, because like, thank you.
No, what's funny is that it's actually kind of the opposite. So yeah. I don't drink, no religious anything. It's just alcoholism in the family. And so I just avoid alcohol. But when I'm around worldly people, your average people in the world, they're like, oh, okay, you don't drink. I mean, I've been to cocktail parties and not drank, and nobody cares, because everybody's just doing their own thing. They don't need to push it on you. But when you're in amongst a bunch of people who need to push things on you, like Jehovah's Witnesses, man, they pushed alcohol on me all the time. Yeah. I could not stand that I would not drink with them. Yeah. And it was like, I just don't want to drink. Like, yeah. Okay, so you do you, I'll do me. Yep. But it is funny how they portray the world. Mm-hmm. I've been around people doing things, in the world, and whatever. Yeah. You want to have some mushrooms or smoke some weed or whatever you want to do what you do. Yep. You do you, I'll do me. Yeah. We're all good.
Exactly.
And nobody cares. They're not pushing it.
No, because drugs cost money, people. So like, no one's trying to share. Like, let's be real. Like, no one is putting edibles in your children's Halloween candy. Like, I would not waste my money on your children. Like, that's silly. I remember being offered Coke one time in my entire life, and I was like, no, I'm good. And they were like, cool, you sure? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, cool, bye. And carried on with everything else that was happening.
They were probably like, more for me.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, cool. Because there was also like a $50 buy-in, and I was like, hard pass. And they were like, great, wonderful. We'll do our thing. And that was that. So it's just, it was the things that you think are supposed to be happening. Like, I've never been in that situation. I've never had some dude passed out on my couch with a needle in his arm and empty beer cans. Like, absolutely not. That's clearly not what I'm going for. So anyway, digressing. So I'm hanging out with these people, and my mom is, multiple times has threatened to like call the elders on me. She threatened to call the cops on me one time because I didn't come back at the time that she said that I'm 21. I've lived in this apartment by myself most of the time for the better part of 3 years. And she is still trying to control me in these ways, in the ways that she feels that she can exert control. So eventually she, continues on traveling and whatnot. And eventually I decided to leave Pennsylvania. I have friends in, not in my congregation, but in like the one of the city congregations. City congregations are a whole different jam. My little country congregation, we all chill and be like, yes, let's sing our songs, let's do our things. The city congregation is just like, it's certainly a different mentality, and there's a freedom. And one of the things that I had always been trying to look for, my friend who we'll call her A, who used to live in the basement, my friend's daughter, whatever. She always had this freedom that I admired. She would like, she lived alone. She'd go out dancing, which I was, she'd go out dancing, she'd drink, and she'd go out with other witnesses who also just wanted to go out dancing. And, she'd be at a club, and like clubs were the devil. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm at a club. What? And she would, if she missed a meeting, she'd like, I'll just go to this other meeting. And it was like not a big deal. And she was just genuinely like living her life in this way that felt so comfortable and so like unrestricted. Mind you, she is certainly like emotionally much deeper in than I ever have been. But it was on like a tether, and she just like had this freedom. She was like traveling, she'd go visit people. And I was just like, how do I get to have joy in this situation in the way that you have done it? And I certainly didn't have that language at the time to just ask that question. But I was looking for a way to, as I got older, I was looking for a way to like be free, to live my life, to like see people and hang out, and to not come back and have somebody be like, you missed a meeting. Where did you go? Blah, 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 blah. But that didn't happen. So I had friends in these city congregations, and we certainly were like drinking at people's houses and hanging out. I was still underage. A friend of mine had gotten married, and I wasn't in the wedding, but I was like around it because we became good friends. And her husband's best friend was this dude who I met him when I was 19. We'll call him Aaron because that's his name. And I'm happy to use it. I haven't talked to him in years. But he was a terrible person because he was a 19-year-old boy and also a Jehovah's Witness. He was a cute enough boy. And we all know that the sister to brother ratio in the cult is very, very off. And so we met at a convention, an assembly, pick a thing there. And he was in my circuit. And so I would see him a few times a year. And he was friends with this friend, and he was cute, and I was interested in him. And being the ambitious person that I am, I try to orchestrate like a first date kind of situation. You gotta have another person. It's a whole thing. And she backed out, and she actually like had a thing with him, but she was engaged to somebody. So that was its own whole thing. Yeah, that was its own whole thing. She was engaged to they got married. He was great. And I was like, why would you be fooling around with somebody else when this dude is actually a lovely, lovely human being? But whatever. So him and I had this kind of back and forthy, like into each other, but not doing it, not committing, and blah, blah, blah. And he was just a trash human. So that was like my first kind of foray into dating as a witness, was just, and like I said, I orchestrated, I am if there is a thing, or if there is a person that I'm interested in, I am happy to initiate it. I asked my husband out the first time. So I'm happy to be like, hello, you seem cool, and let's maybe try to do a thing. That went very poorly, obviously. And he actually ended up, this is like convoluted, this is like some convoluted teen drama. He ended up sleeping with the best friend with a friend's best friend. There's like a love quadrangle happening there.
Okay.
Where the friend who had gotten married to his best friend her friend had previously dated her now husband. They dated for like 3 years and then broken up, and then this friend came along, and the two of them got married. And so that girl I was friends with, we'll call her M, I was friends with, and she ended up sleeping with Aaron. And they got reproved as a result, and she was a pioneer and got that status taken away. And I found out about that later on. And that was like a whole emotional, like, what? She told me on like New Year's, like we had gone out and I had just turned 21. And she told me that, and I was like, oh my God, we got very drunk and as a result, and passed out. But that whole situation just like really turned me off to like a lot of the friends that I had. And one of my good friends started dating someone. And so I was kind of in this place where like the people around me and my other friend C had like become very close with another sister. And so I was kind of in this place where like the people around me were like doing other things apart from me. And while I was still like involved in the congregation very much, I had very much lost that like pioneering joy. You know, I did it for a year. I went to pioneer school and I continued doing it, but I was like never making my hours. I was like bad at it in that regard. But I like lost a lot of I was hanging out with my work friends more and enjoying that a lot more than I was enjoying and feeling much freer in that. I was starting to have some questions. I was starting to have some, I don't know if I would have qualified it as doubt at the time, but definitely some doubt. I was like moving into like some struggle territory where my cognitive dissonance veil was starting to fleck. And it was largely because I wanted a freedom that I could see, but I couldn't like figure out how to get to, especially not with my mom's, little antenna everywhere. So she had gotten a contract in Boston, and I decided to go up with her for 6 weeks, transfer my job for a little bit, and go up with her for 6 weeks and just try different things. So I moved up there with her, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved being in a city. I loved not being in bumfuck. I loved different people, being around different people. I liked the congregation enough. She had been there for a bit and had made some friends, and I liked the people in it. And that ended up being it ended up being harder to fully like get into the congregation than it I guess should have been, or than expected. But I was like, I'm down to leave. I'm down to leave all of these people. I'm down to leave this area and like come up here and do this instead. So I ended up moving to Boston, just outside of Boston, Quincy. And everyone in Pennsylvania was like, "You're moving for a guy, aren't you?" And I was like, "No, I'm a human person who is making a human person decision that is completely irrelevant of some dude." I remember always telling my friends, if I ever got disfellowshipped, it's not going to be over some boy. It's going to be over something that I did myself, a decision that I made myself. I was never about the submission thing. I was like, what dude is going to tell me what to do? What? No, absolutely. Why? For what? Who is he? Is he Jesus? I don't think so. I was not with that. I was not with that submission nonsense. There was a talk one day that was when I was a teenager that was given that there was some example that the guy was like, if you're a wife and your husband, y'all are trying to buy a new car, you're trying to decide what new car to buy. I feel like this is an example that has been given like in a lot of places. You're trying to buy a new car and you decide on something and he comes home with like a bright red Corvette. What are you going to do? Well, the first thing you're not going to do, wife, is yell at him and be mad, because he is the head and he makes the final decision. And I remember sitting in like the second or third row, because we always sat in the front. I was sitting in the second or third row, almost like standing up and cussing somebody out. I was like, what you mean I'm not going to be mad at him? Like, he took my money and bought this dumbass car, and you think I'm not, like, and I just don't have anything to say about that? And in that moment, I was like, cool, I guess I ain't get married then, because I'll kill him. Like, you must be out of your mind. Sit here and think that I'm not
going to run over him with his own Corvette.
Exactly. I'll run you over as I take it back to the dealership. You must be out of your mind.
Oh, that's weird. I remember sitting through many talks that made me scorn. Obviously there are some brothers who relish the whole headship thing, right? And the power that comes from that. But there were plenty of us as well who listened to these talks and were like, good Lord, like that is brutal, or just the antiquated male-female roles and misogyny and everything. Yeah. Like I've not heard that specific example. That's a new one on me. But yeah, I would have been eye rolling in the crowd myself, because that's just, come on, that's garbage.
Exactly.
Like,
I was not with that, obviously. I'm like, excuse me, no. And I remember, we had a fairly, we were not a city, we were, more rural congregation. And so there were plenty of the elders and what, and their wives have been together forever. And you could see, I don't know, from the experience versus what was being said, it often seemed like the wife was like running things, because in most households they are. And so like, witness side, like everywhere we tend to be running a lot, we tend to be house managers. And so in my experience, that wasn't it, but I certainly saw in those same households plenty of times where like, if the husband said something like his word was default, his word was it, or they would look to him and be like, what to do, or, and that would be the decision that was made, or they'd be like, it'll be decided. And when my friend was, when a friend of mine was dating this guy, she really wanted to get, she was certainly, and I think a number of sisters were like groomed to get married. My mom, being a single mom, though we obviously have a complicated, to say the very least, relationship, the growing up and being an adult, and some of the things that she did in fact teach me, how to do my taxes and how to balance a checkbook, and like how to survive on my own. She did her job as a parent in preparing me for the world in a number of ways, and preparing me to be alone in the world. And so, and to not have to rely on someone else, except for her, obviously. But that was not something that like a lot of females were taught, because it was like, you're going to get married and your husband's going to take care of it or deal with it or whatever. And that was like never a thought process that I could get with. I was never about giving my power away, giving the little bit of control that I had of my life away to somebody else. Because just because you have a penis doesn't mean you're better than me. So I can go get a dick too. So I was not about.
Also doesn't mean you want to make all the decisions.
Exactly. So I was like, I was not about it. But she certainly, that friend was very much like, when he, when we're married, he's gonna, we're gonna do what he wants to do. And I was like, okay. She was ready to give the reins over, because that's what she was taught to do.
So that's why they all thought, when you're going to Boston, it must be for a guy, because that sadly for a lot of sisters, I mean, what else is there, right? You've reached the pinnacle of your existence as a sister once you get married, and then your identity is through this brother, especially if he's an elder, and it's really sad.
Yeah. So there was not nary a guy that I was looking at in the congregation in Quincy. There was not nary a guy that was available that I knew of. So I was like, there's absolutely no but everybody was like, this is it. And I remember just being so frustrated and so irritating, because I was like, I'm just a person who is just not happy in the location that she is in, and therefore I am going to move, because I am not a tree and I can't, and so I will. And that's the whole reason. That's it. So I moved to Quincy in May of my 21st year. I don't know what year that was, but it was 7 years ago, apparently. And it's 2014? 2014. Hey, it's 2014. Moved there in May and was disfellowshipped in August. So things move quickly. Let's see what had happened. So I had been pioneering, and just before I moved from Pennsylvania, they called me in and they suggested strongly / told me just that I wasn't going to pioneer anymore, because I hadn't been making my hours. And they were like, maybe you want to just like focus on the move. You got to frame it. They're quite a marketing team. A cult is. And so, they were like, it's for you. And I honestly felt such relief. I was like, thank God, because I couldn't, and it's true, I think of the disfellowshipping as well. I could not bring myself to say that I didn't want to do a thing. In the call, I hadn't wanted to pioneer. And a friend of mine who I had gone to pioneer school with, who I love dearly, only did it for a year and stopped after. And I thought to myself, why didn't I do that? Like, can I do that? I wish I could do that, but I certainly didn't feel like I could, because as long as I was pioneering, I was guaranteed this financial assistance from my mom. And once I stopped pioneering, she had made it clear that she was not necessarily going to support my lifestyle, because I had gone from school to being, to pioneering. So I was like, okay, that's hard. But I would have loved to do it. And my mom was very frustrated too, because she was at home at the time, and I came back and was like, this is what happened, and I'm not going to do it. And she was like, why? What are you doing wrong? Like, how could you not want to do this? How could you not want to continue pioneering? How could you not have been crushing it the entire time?
How can you not want what I want?
Yes, exactly. How are you not fulfilling my dreams to the fullest? And the concept of looking back on it, because we talk about having kids a lot now. Looking back on it, it's not exclusive to the cult, and it's not exclusive to narcissists. It's lots of parents, have their own dreams and like project those dreams on their kid. Whether you're a pageant mom, whether you're a quote unquote tiger mom, which is likely an offensive term now, so I apologize. But like whatever way in which you are driving your child to achieve your version of success is a problem, because what you should be thinking when your kid comes out is that you get what you get, and like you should be down with that. You should be down to support whatever that is. But that's a newer way of thinking about having kids. So there's that. But I didn't want to pioneer anymore. And so they took it away, and I was like, thank you for taking it away. Because I couldn't say that. So I stopped pioneering, and that was kind of that first like layer of quote unquote protection that like gave me, that was like the first taste of freedom. That was like the first thing that gave me like some ounce of freedom, because now my days are not beholden to having to be out in service for 5 to 8 hours and, working that around work and these other things. Like I can do things that I want to do, which was a crazy idea, crazy concept. But it also meant that I had all this free time suddenly, and I was like, idle hands. And as a witness, your time is obviously, it's compact. I'm working. Had no inkling of going to school. I loved school. I crushed it in school. And I would have loved to have gone to college, but I didn't out of high school. Not that I knew what I wanted to do anyway, but I was just kind of like, after that, after pioneering was taken away, I was kind of chilling. And so we moved to, I say we, because my mom's stuff was, with me. And so we continued the financial arrangement. Only now she paid half of rent. So I paid the other half and the rest of the things, because she was still traveling and still coming to stay in the off travel times. So early on in that, in the traveling, or in the being in Boston, I'd gotten another restaurant job, and I was working, I was in the kind of working my way into the congregation. It was really hard. It was a very cliquey congregation that I'd never experienced that. I never experienced that same kind of clickiness. But I think what had actually happened was that my old congregation was also very cliquey, and I was just in the middle of it. So it's probably harder for other people to break in. Thinking back, I can see that some of the people who were like on the outskirts of the inner fold, were trying to break in, and for whatever reason, we judged them, and we, they weren't quite right, this, that, and the third, X, Y, and Z. So now I was on the outside of the clique, and I was trying to get in, and the clique did CrossFit, and a bitch was not about to do CrossFit. So she was not about to join the clique. There was like 6 or 7, and they like did CrossFit. There was like younger people, and they like did CrossFit, and they like came together to do it, and they talked about it like CrossFit people do. And it was just a whole thing. And so I'd be out in service with these people, and I would try to talk, and I would try to, try to build relationships and get to know them, but they talked to each other, and I oftentimes was not there. One of the other things that really got me about this congregation was that one of the women, one of the elders' wives, was also a pioneer. And maybe she wasn't a pioneer, she had been, but she went to college, and a number of people had degrees. And that is a huge difference from like my going from Louisiana to other places in the country to central Pennsylvania, where nobody had a degree. No one went to college because college was bad. College is the devil. So, and she not only had a degree, but she met her husband, who was an elder. She met him when she was traveling, when she was studying abroad in Ireland, which was like, you went to college and you left the country in college? Like, what do you mean? And met your husband, you got married. Like, I was like deeply shook about and I had so many questions, and so many times in my life, I had so many questions that I wanted to ask that I didn't ask. We had a sister in the congregation in Pennsylvania who was anointed, who I went out in service with pretty often. And I always just wanted to be like, how do you know? Like, how do you know? But I could never bring myself to do it. She's probably dead by now, but you know, things that you just want to know that you never feel comfortable asking. And these days, now that I'm free, I ask all kinds of questions, like in all of people's business, because that's what I actually want to do, and that's how you actually forge real human connection.
Sure.
And so in a sense, I was afraid of forging real human connections with people, because that didn't seem like what you were supposed to be doing. Actually, it's not. So, and even with my very, very close friends, when I have doubts about things, or be nervous about stuff in the congregation, when I wanted to ask questions, I did not feel comfortable. They would be like, they were in it, or at least they presented themselves to be in it. And when people would be, after a convention or something, you're supposed to like talk about the convention or the assembly or whatever in the car. And I'm like, don't we just like spend 8 hours listening to a bunch of stuff? And they're like, what point did you appreciate? Isn't it so great how Jehovah loves us and provides us information? I would just be like sitting awkwardly in the car my entire life. Like, I loved the drama. That was lit. But other than that, like for the things that didn't have a drama, I was like, I don't know. This thing was fine.
Well, the drama was the only new thing. Everything else was the same talks you've heard 1,000 times.
Exactly. The reminders. You're so loving to provide the reminders that we have.
It's called brainwashing.
For. It is. It's called propaganda.
That's the reminders.
So happy to get new propaganda. Let's read the new propaganda. Mm-hmm. But obviously, I never read anything because I didn't want to. I was an avid reader of not that. So I had no interest in it. When my mom first started, my mom has also always been an avid reader. When she was studying, before they came to her house the first time, she read the entire knowledge book and had studied the first 2 chapters, like on her first visit. Yep. She also offered them wine coolers because she didn't really know what to offer them. Like, that stopped quickly. But yeah, I was not about it at all. So I always felt really awkward and uncomfortable when people would like talk about how much they love Jehovah, because I knew that I was like supposed to, but like, I don't know, feeling wise, it wasn't necessarily that. But I definitely felt guilty about not.
And is that the kind of people that you were running into there in Boston? So not only CrossFitters, but people who are maybe talking about things a little more deeply than you kind of cared to get into it?
Yeah, that was my experience, definitely in central Pennsylvania with various friends, not the city people who I was drinking with because we were busy drinking, but other friends in my congregation. And then in Boston, yeah, a similar situation. And it always felt very genuine, and I would always be kind of envious of their faith and the fact that the presumption that they felt that they were able to feel so strongly, and that feeling motivated them, because the feeling was rarely the feeling. Fear motivated me for sure. That Armageddon dream like kept a bitch going, but the other feelings of just wanting to, I assume, and it's a feeling that I don't have about, but it's this feeling of wanting to please God and doing it because, I don't know, you should, or because, not because you should. For me, it was because you should, as dictated by my mother and the cult. But because that feeling of doing it because they wanted to, I didn't really want to. I just wanted to like hang out. So like be a 21-year-old. And so, and every other age before that. And so I found, so yeah, when that would happen, it certainly happened in Boston, it was hard to relate, but I could like and it was hard to pretend. It was definitely when, you know, when those things came up, it was harder for me to pretend, to be emotionally invested in a positive way. That's how I would say that. It was, you know, because I certainly was invested in terms of guilt. I was invested in terms of shame. I was invested in terms of not wanting my mom to call the elders because I'm hanging out with the worldly people. And to get myself disfellowshipped, you know, I was less concerned with embarrassing her at that age by then, and had been for years, because we had lived such separate lives. And I was like, and I kind of, you know, had started in those years, in my late teens and early 20s, it started asserting that kind of independence, that separation, you know, that like you were doing this, and if like X, Y, and Z looks bad on you, then X, Y, and Z looks bad on you, but that's because you do it. If I do something and it looks bad on me, that shouldn't be, whether, you know, like this is 100% a discussion that we had, whether or not someone thinks that it is on you, that's on them. That's not on me. Their projection is not on me. If I do something, it makes me look, if I do whatever, it makes me look bad. You are irrelevant to my success. And she was like not having that at all. So, but I was certainly realizing that. I was like, we are two people, and I'm tired of I'm tired of, and she uses the royal we all the time. And I was like, I hate it. I absolutely hate the royal we. We are not doing, I am doing this and you are doing that. We are two separate people. We are anonymous. We are not one person. So, yeah. So the moving to Boston, moving to Quincy, and working in Boston was a different thing, because I had moved to a place and I was there by myself for the first time. It was the first time one of the reasons that I love Boston was because it was the first place that I had chosen to live myself. You know, we had moved lots of places, and that was contractually obligated, and also being a child. But we moved to Boston, and I was like, I want to be here because I want to be here, and for no other reason. And so, and the reason being, I don't want to be there. So I got there, and you know, I wasn't pioneering anymore. When I had been there in the months, you know, prior, when I, you know, was there for a little bit, and then we came back to Pennsylvania and moved the stuff, and then, you know, moved officially. I had been pioneering, and so I wasn't anymore. And that was a question. And I was like, you know, just seemed like a better move not to. And I remember one of the brothers asking me, probably the elder, the Irish brother, who's married to the lady with a degree, were probably the closest. He was probably my, like, I feel like everybody has like their elder, like their person, you know, he was my person in that congregation. And so, we talked about it, and cause he was younger too. And so, we talked about, you know, not pioneering. And I was like, no, there's no, like, it's not like a disciplinary thing. It was just I mean, I guess maybe to an extent it was, but it was, you know, nothing like official, but I hadn't like done anything bad.
Right.
But taking away pioneering and taking away like that, the time that was spent there certainly lent itself to the future, to the rest, because like,
what else do you want to do with your life now?
Exactly. And the answer is that I have absolutely no direction, because my entire ambition has been devoted to ladder climbing in this cult. And so I have been pushed off of the ladder, or at the very least held up on a rung. And I can't do it. There's no more forward progression. You're just a regular witness at that point. You know, you go from having celebrity status in the congregation to just being a regular ass witness. And there's nothing special about that. I mean, if you always have been, there is, but for someone who has been to the mountaintop and seen the promised land, coming back down is not.
I'm sorry, I have to laugh, because it's like pioneering is the mountaintop.
That's it.
Or, you know, like I was a ministerial servant. That's the mountaintop. That is what we're reaching for. Like, that is such a sad mountain.
Well, the promised land is Bethel or missionary or
right.
something else.
But even that, like, where is the real glitz and glamour to any of that? Where is that? Anything?
You might be on a JW broadcaster. You might be in a drama.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's it. That's all. You might be in a magazine. Your experience might be in a yearbook. Someone might read about you. That's JW fame right there.
Yeah.
So,
but there's so much more to life, and that's such sad life goals. It really is.
It is when life,
that's all you got.
Double, and that is the only full that you've ever known. Then,
I've been a pioneer and a ministerial servant, and I get it. When you come down off that ladder,
it changes, and your opinion of yourself changes largely, and whether or not anyone else's opinion of you does. Because I think.
Allow me to break in here for a second. This channel is made possible by you, the listener. If you appreciate what we're doing here, please consider supporting at patreon.com/shunned, or leave a review on iTunes or other platforms. Like and subscribe. All those things help the channel. If you're looking for merch, you can go get some Shunned swag from the shunnedpodcast.com website, or reach out there to be on the show. If you're looking for more ex-Jehovah's Witness content, I'll recommend my first podcast called This JW Life. You can find that on podcast apps as well as YouTube. And if you're feeling stuck in life, struggling to find happiness and community, maybe you're haunted by the past, beating yourself up, unsure of who you are or what you even want out of life now that you've lost this one identity that was given to you by a cult, reach out through my other sites like xjwhelp.com, that's exjwhelp.com, or storyworkscoaching.com. And let's see about working together to help you find a life that fits you and who you are, maybe for the first time ever. And now, back to our guest.
I think if you're not, this may be a general statement that I'm getting at, but I think that one of the biggest lie that they have told is convincing you that you need them and that they dictate, who you are, obviously, and your worth, and tying yourself to that. And so, regardless of other people, they've made it essentially so that every person is their own cult leader, is the cult leader of their own life.
Oh, yes.
And so, if you are at this proverbial mountaintop and you do this thing and you fall from glory, even though everyone sees you, I would not say that, like, for me personally, when people, step down as elders, because generally I know the situation, or people weren't pioneering anymore or whatever, it did not necessarily change my opinion of them. I still would see them as, but you did this thing for a while, and maybe, whatever happened. And maybe I had more empathy than I should have. I
was going to say, I think you're the exception there, maybe more than the rule, but maybe I'm wrong. Usually people start talking about it and trying to figure out what you did wrong.
Yeah.
You're not now just one of them as a publisher. You're the person that was up there and fell from grace. And so, like, why? What's wrong with you? They start looking at you with the side eye, exactly. Or at least they did in the places I've been.
Yeah, when people got reproved or disfellowshipped, I certainly had, like, that empathy went out the window, and, like,
right. Well, I've seen it as well with coming down from those positions.
I've certainly seen other people have the same reaction. And I think and again, this, for much of my life, also taking context, for much of my life, I was in 2 congregations for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
So, or up to, upwards of, for many years. And so I was, for most of my witness life, i.e. my life, I was in the middle. Yeah. And so I knew I was one of the people who do everybody's business anyway. So I didn't have to ask questions. I didn't have to, and the older that I got, the more I kind of understood, like, there is more than, and I truly understood it after I was fellowship, but there's more than, people step down for more than negative reasons.
Oh, of course.
One of the biggest things that I remember, one of the elders he was an elder when we met, he was a ministerial servant, but he had been an elder, and his son is still disfellowshipped, I believe. And he stepped down after his son had gotten disfellowshipped. Not that he did anything, and it's not, he wasn't in the house or anything. He was, over here somewhere doing whatever. And he stepped down because he didn't feel like he could do whatever. And I don't know of I would say probably most of the congregation kind of knew the situation. I don't remember anyone looking at him differently. He, for me, was certainly still, quote unquote, a spiritual pillar in the congregation. He eventually became, took up the elder reins again. But I don't remember thinking of him any differently as a result of that situation, because I think in the same vein, I'm so violently fighting for my own independence from my mother and separating the two of us and our successes and our mistakes, however they may be defined, that I was fully like, your son is not you. Like if he gets, that's whatever. That's not necessarily a reflection on you. I didn't think, but I'm sure that plenty of people did.
Sure.
And the same with pioneering. I remember like someone stopped pioneering because she was old. She was old. Like, she was just old.
Yeah.
And it was like, this doesn't seem.
So
that's not. I didn't feel like a big deal.
So what ultimately then transpired? Because you said you moved to Boston and it went May to August. You're not pioneering. You're not fitting in with the people there quite so much.
Yeah.
So what is it that, I guess, how do things end for you as far as this first chapter of your life?
So previously I had applied with a friend of mine when I was still pioneering to go to the international convention, which was held in 2014. And we had gotten accepted. And so we went to Texas to the international convention as delegates, which was a dope experience. That was like the actual mountaintop probably. Because you get, they like, tote you around and you do all these different experiences. And it was honestly just a really fun trip. It was like a week or so, and we made some good friends at that time. But before that happened, damn, shit went south quick. Before that happened, in moving, I had already been feeling very lonely. And that was one of the reasons why I left in the first place. It felt like my friends were kind of moving on without me and we would do other things without me. And I didn't really feel like I had a direction in terms of where to go when I was in Pennsylvania to like, I was like looking to move to do something else, but I didn't know what. And so I was feeling really lonely. I was feeling really alone because I'm now in this place. I don't know anyone. I don't have these friends that I'd always have someone at my house, or I'd always be at someone else's, or we'd go out, or, I've always had a rich social calendar. And so I struggled with not having that community, even though it felt so close. It felt like it was in arm's reach. And I made some friends, but it just, I don't know, I wouldn't like vibing with people in a long-term way, it felt. A couple friends, one friend actually, I did have, and she is also now out of the cult and happier and has come out and is like living her absolute best life, and reached out to me a couple years later and apologized for shunning me, because I think she disassociated and was like bad at this whole situation, and like the whole thing was fucked up, obviously. And we've been in touch, and she's lovely and she's great. And but I was feeling very alone, and the friends that I was making were my friends at work, because I had yet another restaurant job. And it's very easy to make friends in a restaurant job because everyone hates all of the customers, and you have this mutual frustration that you then drink about late at night because you're out late at night. So I was out, my mom wasn't there. I was anonymous. I was anonymous for the first time in my life, like anonymous with like no additional overhead besides Jehovah, who I didn't really care a whole lot about. So I became friends with my coworkers. Two of my coworkers are my best friends to this day. One officiated my wedding, and the other one walked me down the aisle. And I started hanging out with these coworkers more. And in that, there was a bar down the street. There were like 3 or 4 restaurants in this one street in downtown Boston. And we were going to this one place, and I met a guy there, as happens. And we started hanging out. We went on a few dates, and I had not had sex because you're not supposed to. But it was just like a perfect storm of things. I also was feeling really lonely and alone when I wasn't at work. So I worked a lot. And that was a thing that I had started doing after my mom had stopped paying the mortgage. I worked a lot so that I could not be at home because I didn't want to be around her. And so I was constantly picking up shifts when I wasn't, in service. I was working. I think actually when she first quit, I wasn't pioneering. So I was just working all the time, whenever possible. And feeling, while feeling like I never had any money at the same time. So I was working a lot at the restaurant. I was with these people a lot. I met this guy and we started hanging out, and he started, gave me attention. And all my little extroverted self wanted was attention. So he shows up, and it wasn't a good situation. It wasn't like it was like bad abusive, but it wasn't good. Neither of us were
healthy.
Neither of us were healthy. That's a good word.
It's hard to be coming from dysfunction. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He was, and the only, kind of dating guy situation that I'd really had experience with was Shitty Aaron, who was, back and forth. And so, yeah, I'm put him on blast. He's probably never going to hear this, but it's a very common name. But that was it. And so I kind of had this, and of course I'm socialized in the same way as every other female in America or in the world, that in regards to like men taking the lead in sexual situations, and never having had any discussion of sex in my own body, and what all of that, might look like. Obviously all the sex ed that I had was don't have sex until you get married, and then do. And that's it. So I don't know. I didn't know what to do, but I also knew that being a submissive wife was never going to be it for me, which meant that being married as a Jehovah's Witness was never going to be it for me. And I was like, maybe it could happen, but like probably not. So, but I was 21 and I was thirsty as hell, and I was like,
sure, of course.
If I'm not gonna,
I was gonna say, take all the other circumstances out, and biologically,
yeah, time.
Of course,
time,
yeah.
He was there. It was time. I was like, all right, man, I guess I could do this. So I was like, I want to have sex. You're here. There's that. I wouldn't say that I certainly wouldn't say that I was like quote unquote ready, because there had not been any kind of conversation, but I like wanted to. And he definitely pressured. He wanted to. So I was like, I guess it was my first sexual experience, me saying, I guess, which is the minimum, barest of minimums of any version of consent possible. So we did that, and that was Friday. I had sex on a Friday, and I confessed on a Sunday. And actually I had sex with somebody else on Saturday, but that's not necessarily relevant to the story. I was like, cool, we're just jumping right in. Let's go. So I confessed on Sunday, and then I think like after that was when the convention happened. I think I had confessed, and then the convention happened. Maybe it was just before, like, I had slept with this guy. Somewhere in that window, though, I think it was after was when I had to go to this convention, and I really relished the trip. Partially because it was really fun, but partially because it was what I knew as probably one of the last times I'd get to spend with this person who had been my best friend since I was 8 years old. The person who we would do weekends together. So we were really, really close, and we didn't see each other very often because I lived in Massachusetts and she lived in Louisiana. And so I really hold that trip really dearly, and I still have the pictures of it on my phone because that's the last time that I ever saw her. And I knew the entire time that it was, like I said, it was probably going to be the last time.
You knew that the end was coming.
I knew that the end was. I felt that the end was coming. Because I also had this feeling of, I was taught that if you do the thing and you confess, you get reproved. That's what happened to my mom. She did the thing, she confessed, she got reproved. Like, I was.
Yeah.
I was like, cool. I've done the appropriate things. I didn't hide it. I didn't get caught. I told on myself immediately. And I had actually previously, probably in a week or two before, had told, when we first moved, I told one of the brothers who would help me move, part of my moving was getting a fresh start. What I was recognized with myself in Pennsylvania was that I was hanging out with my work friends a lot more, was that I was kind of waning in my desire to do more in the quote unquote truth. And I just talked to my circuit overseer about it because we were really close. And his wife had said, he had a restaurant job at one point and had kind of felt the same thing and had to cut it out. And everybody's like, advice is like, here's a scripture. And
sure.
And I was like, cool, thanks for the scripture. And so when I had moved, I told the brother that I wanted to have a kind of fresh start and kind of do things differently. And that, this felt like a good kind of, start over situation. And he actually used that in my judicial meeting later, but we'll get to that. One of the other brothers who was in my judicial meeting, I told that I wanted to, I told him that I was having some trouble, feeling it. And like feeling the motivation to keep doing this, to keep work. It's really hard to be a witness when you aren't, when you don't have the community, when you don't have people when you're not being love bombed actively. It's really hard to just keep doing it. And so it's because it's the other, for me at least, is the outside affirmations that validate it. It's the people surrounding you saying you're doing the right thing. And if no one is talking to you or hanging out with you actively and you're just sitting alone a lot, then it's hard to see it as the right thing, right. Or a useful thing even.
Right. So you went to the convention, you enjoyed your time there, and then you're coming back
to a judicial meeting,
and there's this thing looming.
Yes.
So what was it like? I mean, so I know you enjoyed the convention, but when you got back and that's what's facing you, I mean, what is that feeling when you come back? I mean, that has to be a pit of the stomach.
Yeah, the whole trip was a pit of the stomach.
Okay, because you knew it was looming.
Because I knew it was looming. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to talk to her about it, and I did not feel like I could. I felt like
no. Oh, that's hard too.
I wanted to tell her that, whether or not I shared details, I wanted to say, like, this is something that could be happening. And, it's my fuckery and I did it and I know that I did. And I told on myself immediately because I felt so much shame. But at the same time, I felt relief for having had sex. It wasn't good, but it did happen. And I found out what all the hype was. And like I said, it wasn't good, so it wasn't that much hype. But not till way later. But I wanted to share that this was happening, that I was struggling with it, but it didn't feel like you don't give people who are disfellowshipped or who are about to be any kind of grace in regards to like the decision that they made, or like context is not. The
context is irrelevant. It's
context is completely irrelevant.
Again, it's style over substance, right?
Yeah,
it's keeping up appearances. They don't care about the why so much.
Exactly. And so I didn't say anything, and I just I had it in my mind, and I knew that it happened, and I went into this. So I come back from this vacation, and just as I come back, and we have to schedule this judicial meeting, it gets pushed off because my grandma gets diagnosed with cancer, and she's in Southern Mississippi. And so my mom leaves her contract and we drive down to Southern Mississippi. Is this the timeline? It's close enough. We drive down to Southern Mississippi to bring my grandma up to Memphis, where my aunt is living, because there's a lot of really good cancer centers there. And my mom moves in with my grandma into my aunt's house, because my aunt has bought this giant house for her and her small dog. So she moves in there and she helps take care of my grandma throughout her treatments and whatnot. On the way down, just another great moment between me and my mother. On the way down, I tell my mom, we're driving from Massachusetts to Southern Mississippi. We're like somewhere in upstate Vermont. This is like how long I can hold water. No, we're somewhere in upstate New York. And this is as long as I can hold water. We've got, probably like 4 hours into the first day of like a multi-day drive. And I was like, I might be getting disfellowshipped because this happened. And my mom's response is, how could you do this to me right now?
I knew that would be the response. I knew that would be the response. I'm so sorry, because that is so, it's just, yeah, but it's just so narcissistic. And it's just, like, how can you do this to, it's all about them. It's always all about them.
Yeah. And it got me, and it kind of solidified this, like, oh, you are not my mother. Like, you're certainly not my mother, because no further questions were asked, no further, information was inquired about. There was no, like, how did you get here? There was no, what happened? There was no, and later when we talked about it, she was like, as a witness, I didn't feel like I could ask like it was my business. And I was like, you're my mother. You should, like, that should trump this. That should be number one. It's not, but it should be. So, that was a rough one. And so we went through this, whatever multi-day drive down to Southern Mississippi, pick up my grandma. We're in this, we're just in this car of like discomfort, and we don't like necessarily, we kind of like glaze over it for the sake of the rest of the drive and talk about other things. And, but it certainly was a thing. And she was certainly very upset, obviously, with me about it. And I, felt like shit. I mean, the shame ran deep, and the shame ran deep for a long time.
Of course.
So fine. So, we get my grandma, bring her to Memphis. My mom stays there. I fly back home. I'm in Massachusetts. I don't have a car now. So, because we, shared a car. And so now I finally have this judicial meeting, and I sit through this meeting, and they ask these extremely intimate questions, as you've heard about, about, did you come, and how many times have you had sex, and are you still in touch? And at that time, we hadn't spoken since. He like literally didn't reach out to me afterwards, and I was like, cool, I had sex the first time and got ghosted, love it. And felt like shit for that also. There was no the whole time they definitely, and I realized this, and I was quite a stoic person. I cry all the time now, but I did not then, because crying did not serve me for a very long time. I was like, I still got to do life, and so these fucking tears are gonna get.
Well, yeah, when you have to just survive in those environments, you don't have time to feel
right.
good.
I have time for all these feelings and whatnot. So I'm sitting here in this judicial meeting at age 21, had sex for the first time, told on myself immediately, have this meeting, however long later. Grandma's got cancer, mom hates me. I'm not gonna probably be able to talk to my best friend, anyone again. All of these things looming over my tiny little self, and I literally no one to talk to about it, because I don't have anyone in the congregation, and the people who I have, I'm about to lose because of this. So I'm sitting there in this meeting, and I put on this very stoic face, because also I'm talking to these three guys who I barely know. I've been in this congregation for a few months, and like probably a good month of it, the last month I'd been traveling forever. So I sat there through it, and I gave my answers very clearly and very concise. And I did not cry, and I refused to. I was like, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry in front of you people. I don't know you. This is not the situation. I remember when I sat down, because it was the younger brother, the one who had helped me move, and the other one who I had spoken to about kind of feeling like I wasn't feeling it. His advice had been to read the Psalms. I was like, okay, cool. So I did that. Obviously didn't change anything, because here we are. And the one was like, at the end of me just telling this very intense and going through the traumatic experience of telling these strange men about my sexual exploit. The one brother was like, so I guess you didn't, you moved here to start fresh, and said something to the effect of, I guess you didn't do that. I guess you just continued down the path. And I was like, this seems like a great time to say that, doesn't it?
That seems very unfair.
it was very unfair, and I had absolutely no rebuttal because I don't.
They had already judged you. There's nothing you
yeah.
could.
When I sat down for the meeting, too, the younger brother who I knew was like, "We're not here to judge you," and I was like, "This is literally called a judicial meeting, my dude."
Yeah, that's exactly what they're there for.
It's literally what we're here for. Actually, it's for the judging of me and for the sealing of my fate. So I went out, you know, I said all my shit, didn't cry, refused, like held it in, and went out, prayed. 12 minutes later, came back in and said, this committee has made the decision to disfellowship. And I was like, okay, because what else am I going to say? I didn't have a car. So additionally, they had given me a ride. I had a ride
no
back.
way.
Oh, yes way.
The elders gave you a ride to your judicial committee and then had to take you back?
Yep. So that was great. And then I went home and cried for a long time. And
what an abusive situation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was really awful. Yeah, I had no tools. I had no tools to deal with it.
Well, and who are you going to turn to?
Yeah,
your mom is an emotional desert who can't give you anything.
Yep.
The elders just did that and then drove you home. Yeah, what are you gonna do?
So I just sat there and I cried and I went to work the next day. That's what you have to do. I was like, I still got to pay this rent, and I was like, now that I'm disfellowshipped, I don't even know if she's going to pay, continue helping me pay for half. So we'll see. And I'm still early, and I'm still so early in my lease. Like, we'll see. So that, so I got the financial possibility. I call my mom, whenever the announcement's going to be made the next week, get the chance to appeal. No one ever appeals, for what?
Well, the appeal is not about
it's not about
retrying it. It's just, did the elders make a procedural error?
Exactly.
Very few times is anything ever going to get over. The appeal is a farce.
Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't going to do it. And because I knew how it goes, my feeling, and I feel like many people's feeling on the appeal, is that because the decision is supposedly coming down from Jehovah, how they're getting that information, I don't know, because y'all ain't even the governing body, but whatever. Because that's where it's supposed to be coming from. If the appeal is seen as, questioning God, and I'm not going to question God. I just talked to him, and I told him that I was okay with whatever decision that he made, and this is what he made, so this is what I'm going with. And while that's obviously very flawed and incorrect, obviously that's where we were. So went home, cried, had to call my mom. That conversation went shittily. I don't remember what was said, but I know it went shittily, and essentially was a, of course, and how could you do this to me? And well, I hope you have fun out in the world. Because the assumption is always that, that you wanted to leave, that the portrayal, the same.
You've turned your back on them.
It's that you've turned your back on them. It's that you were like, I don't want to do this. And they were like, well, you have to go as a result. Like,
it's like you chose fun over them.
Exactly. And that was not at all it. I confessed because that's what I was told to do. And I thought that I would get help. And the help that I got was being kicked out. So I called her. I had to, in the course of this week, had to call my best friends and tell them what had happened because they were in the congregation. The two of the friends were very sympathetic. They were like, obviously it's a very shitty situation, and they didn't say shitty, but it's a bad situation, and we'll miss you, and we hope to see you soon. We hope that you're back soon. There was not a whether or not there actually was. There was not it was not put on me in this. You chose it. It was not portrayed by them as a you chose fun over me situation. But then my best friend who I had who had lived with us, when I called her to tell her what had happened, there was a long pause, and then she just said bye, and that was the end of that
Oof.
10 plus year relationship. You know, there was nothing. There was nothing there. That one still gets me. Her and my mom still have a relationship, and she said some things after, in an attempt to give my mom an answer as to why I had been disfellowshipped. Not that my mother could ever just ask me, her child. She literally.
Oh, no.
And the story was that I had gotten jealous over my friend who had gotten married, and so I lost my mind and decided to just go off. And that was its own hurt that, you know, that I found out about, you know, a year or so later, because not only did it mean that this person who I had advocated for, who I had gone to bat for repeatedly with my mother over the years, you know, could lie about this because she had no idea what had happened because she never asked. But also that my mother would choose to believe her instead of asking her own child what had happened, or having any interest in asking her own child what would happen.
Yeah, and sadly, what you're seeing there is, you know, C has her own issues.
Yeah.
C lost her own family, it sounds like, to some degree.
To some degree.
You
know, the situation is.
Yeah. My point about that is just that, you know, C doesn't have good mental and emotional tools.
Yeah, exactly.
So she just shut down over this. It was just a betrayal to her, or an abandonment, or whatever, just like your mom. And then they just, you know, C probably just made up some sort of story that made it feel right to her.
Yeah.
And then shared that story with your mom. And you know what you're seeing is these people claim to have the truth, but they don't care about truth. They care about the stories that prop up the narratives that they already have. They want validation of their own stories. They don't want the true story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The actual truth was irrelevant, and I think
it's irrelevant. Yeah.
I only told my mom the actual truth probably last year. So after I get disfellowshipped, the announcement's made. I saw that guy like one more time after that, and he was like, "I'm moving to DC," and I was like, "Of course you are." So that, you know, that was that. Various, searching for validation in various men's beds that didn't work.
Well, of course, yes. That would be normal.
Yeah, that was the attention I was looking for, and I had my friends at work, and I just really threw myself into work, and I just lived in shame for a very long time. The earlier years were really hard, and I feel like I probably did a lot of dissociating from reality in those years. And after my lease was up, I moved to Memphis, and that made it even harder because I was now living with my mom, and I was living with my aunt and my grandmother. a lot of estrogen in one house, and my mom hadn't really spoken to me in the course of that year. She texted me on my birthday. Just a whole bunch of spewed a whole bunch of nonsense, just a hateful remark after a hateful remark. And that obviously didn't help. Definitely rolled through some suicidal thoughts for a while. I remember once standing at the train waiting on, but the whole time, for much of the time that I was fellowship, I went to meetings. I went every week, twice a week. I didn't have
shame makes you do that a lot of times.
Shame makes you do it. So I did what I was supposed to do. I'm very much about the rules. And so, like, what you're supposed to do after you do a thing is confess, take your punishment, whatever it is, and then work real hard to make it look like at least you want to come back. And so I did, I worked my steps. And but while I was doing that, I also was still enjoying going out with my friends who I had met from my job and had gotten much closer to like my two best friends that I have now still, and nurturing those relationships, and I clung to those, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're still so close to this day, was that they were it. my one friend especially, like, she was it. And so I was like at her house all the time, and her husband, her now husband, and her roommates were like, why is she always here? I was like, they literally have nowhere else to go. That's why. So that, and she was like, whatever. She's a homebody for sure. So she was like, cool, you want to come to my house and hang out and watch hours and hours of American Horror Story? And I was like, I guess. So that's what we did. And so that's what we still do. Different shows, but that's what we still do. So that, yeah, those relationships are really built. I definitely clung to what I could. And when I went to Memphis, I got close, we still talked every other day. One of my friends, we actually got much closer in that time when I was away. Living in Memphis with my mother was hard because we went from not talking to living in the same house and on the same floor. And so we definitely talked but we talked around the whole JW thing. And I would go to the meetings there. I went to meetings at her congregation, and everyone knew that, obviously I was her daughter, and I was fellowshipped and had met with elders there. And I did my due diligence when I left Memphis and moved back to somewhere else in Massachusetts. I went to the local congregation and I kept going, and I talked to the elders there, and I was like, this is where I am, blah, blah, blah. But in every situation over time, I eventually stopped going to the meetings, because it's a lot to walk into a building with 60 people who will not acknowledge your existence ever at any point, or to walk into a new building and tell one or two people that you're disfellowshipped, knowing that it's going to get spread immediately, to just constantly re-traumatize yourself for the sake of what? For the sake of your shame. That's what. And so, and for the sake of your genocidal God. So did that for years, probably did that for 4 or 5 years. And I couldn't, at a certain point, I started therapy. And I started therapy when I moved back to Massachusetts, because how did I present this to this lovely, lovely woman? I was like, this is my story, and, there are lots and lots of layers and things, and I am supposed to be a Jehovah's Witness, and for some reason, I just don't want to be, and I need to fix that. I need to want to be so that I can. And she was like, okay, cool. Where do we even start here? So over time, I went to therapy every week for years, and I had a little break, and lost insurance, whatever, and had a little break, came back, and had a whole summer situation, and moved through a lot of stuff. And probably within a year, I was very sporadically going to the meetings, and was not. But feeling guilty every time. I remember one time being with my best friend and her husband, another friend of ours, and on a Sunday we had gone to a sports bar for wings and beer, and it was during the meeting time, and I had eaten. Someone had made brownies, blondies, and that were edibles, and I had eaten way more of it than I needed to, and got way too high at the sports bar. And I sat there in my deep high paranoia, and was 100% positive that someone was going to come in and blow up this sports bar, and I would die because I hadn't gone to the meeting instead that day. And thinking back, I'm like, man, that was a rough one. But that, moments like that happen. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's had it.
No, what you're saying is it's the fear lingers.
Yeah, the fear lingers, and the paranoia, and that very literal feeling of the Kingdom Hall being a refuge, being the salvation. I would be one of those people who, during there was a tsunami or something, however long ago, and these people literally ran to the Kingdom Hall thinking that it would protect them, and died in the hall. And of course you did. Thinking about it now, it's obviously you moved to actual shelter or away from the situation, but this feeling of protection, whether it be baptism, whether it be pioneering, whether it just be being whatever label that you have been given or taken on that is this a lie of protection. That lie feels very real.
And the people you needed to be protected from was them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I've rolled up into, I'm like in the line. I walked into the lion's mouth. So, so I remember like that was just that was rough.
But you were in therapy.
But I was in therapy.
And it sounds like so things did start to get better for you.
Started getting better for sure. Things really shifted when I was like 24 at this point, close to 25, and I wanted to go to Europe. I went on a solo trip to Europe. And I had been thinking to myself, I've been like dating kind of, whatever, off and on for years, little situationships here and there. And that's what they were, situationships.
I like that name. I've never heard that, situationships. I like that.
It's a very accurate description of the people who rolled in and out of
Understood
those years. And I was at the point where I was kind of moving into this, like, I want a relationship. And that was kind of a breaking point where it was like, okay, you want a relationship. Are you going to go back and get a relationship, or are you going to get a relationship outside? And if you do, that was kind of my like shit or get off the pot moment in regards to living my life in this constant shame. Probably got like ulcers on ulcers as a result of all these years of struggle. But that was kind of it. It was like, okay, moving forward, you want a person in your life, and how are you going to justify having someone who isn't? And are you going to, or are you going to just be like, no to this, I'm going to do this. Like, what are you going to commit to? So I went on the solo trip to Europe. It was amazing. It was wonderful. Did lots of stuff, saw lots of things, had a little situationship with a British guy that went south, but came back and felt more like in my body, in my power, just better about myself, and able to kind of move in a direction. And that year was the first year, my 25th birthday was the first birthday that I like openly celebrated, openly was like, I'm doing this. And there was still certainly a feeling of guilt, a feeling of like, but it was a magical birthday. It
25th on the 25th, right?
It was my golden birthday. It was the first only white Christmas I had ever experienced. It snowed like a lot the night before I woke up. It was absolutely beautiful. We lived near a cemetery, so friends came over. We walked through the cemetery. It was just quiet. Christmas, I highly recommend people walk around wherever you are on Christmas Day. It is just quiet. Going to New York every year with my mom, Manhattan it's not completely quiet, but it's much quieter on Christmas, and it's just a surreal experience. So that was an amazing birthday, and a couple months later, I met my now human, and I think that was the further push to figure out what I want to do if I was gonna keep doing this or not, and if I was gonna keep oscillating this feeling of shame and guilt, going to meetings, sometimes not, that kind of thing. I was really, really sporadic at that point. And it was just that I didn't want to. And it felt wrong to be like, I want to go hang out and like drink and smoke with my friends instead of doing this. And to get to a place where that was okay, I was still a bit of a ways off from at that point, but I was certainly like rolling up to it. Because, like, I don't have any attachment to these people that I don't know. I sit here and they don't look at me. Like, they don't, I don't know. I had become more and more jaded with being at meetings. I remember there was a comment someone made about genders and people. She said something about people being like, I don't know if, they're like, I don't know if I want to be a male or a female, if I want to say she or he or they or all of this nonsense, blah, blah. And I remember like that comment getting me and being like, what if somebody in this room is non-binary and you just like turn them off to your cult? Like, that's some, that I was like, I'm not with that. So I started realizing that, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses is an all or nothing decision. Mm-hmm. And I had built a community of queer people, non-binary people, of different races, different religious beliefs, got some Wiccan friends, like, and I was like, I don't think any of these people are wrong. And if push comes to shove, then, you know, if I go back, that means I have to cut off these relationships with people for these reasons that I now find to be arbitrary reasons, because I see these people as human people, as great human people. And so I was moving away mentally, and in therapy we were talking a lot about it. And I was not at the point of using the word cult, but I was at, you know, really at the point of seeing that the separation, that me not doing it was maybe not going to be the end of the world. There was also this backwards comfort that I wonder if I assume other people kind of find, where, you know, the God that Jehovah's Witnesses talk about, while he's going to kill probably everyone, he is not, like, the existence of hell or purgatory, like this eternal pain, does not exist. I think pain is a wrapped up in people's fear of death. And if I was to, oh, my dad's calling me. Sorry about that. If he's the God that we're, you know, they're saying that he is, then if he destroys me, if he kills me, then that's just it. Like, that's just the end. You know, I'm like gone. Mm-hmm. There's no, you know, like, they're like, what is there to be afraid of there then? If that's the worst thing that's going to happen. If the worst thing that's going to happen is actually me losing my community, though, I've been there.
That is the worst thing. There's your punishment.
Yeah, punishment, already doing that. So cool. The next thing is what, he's going to kill me? Cool. Like, death sounds nice and quiet, actually. So. Yeah.
So you're starting to wake up to some of the realities of this. Obviously, you're distancing yourself because you've got this other community you're building that is diverse.
Yeah.
And that does not fit into the tiny, tiny box that Jehovah's Witnesses live in. And that's a part of waking up.
Yeah.
But now, what gets you to the point where you can wake up mentally and emotionally to it, you know, doctrinally, or the fact that it's a cult? Like, what started you waking up to the harsh realities of not just this group of people that I like now doesn't mesh with this group of people, or my lifestyle that I want to live or a relationship I want to have may not mesh with Jehovah's Witnesses? But what helped you to start waking up to the doctrinal issues, the issues within the cult, and that it is a cult?
So I feel like I started using the word cult before pandemic, but really emotionally, like, COVID rolled through and stopped everything, shook everything up. By then, I had been with my now husband for 2 years or so. We were together. We've been living together for a year. It was a lot of as far as, like, it dictating my lifestyle, I didn't really think about it as much. Definitely things, I'm sure he'll say, like, definitely certain things came up, and, you know, he's very much an atheist and always has been, and did not grow up in a faith-based community. So the entire concept of this is like, the fuck, you know, especially in a cult extreme. And then we had a number of conversations about it, and about, you know, if we have kids, like, how are we, you know, where we go, like, will you still be trying to go back then? And I was still unsure. And but I can like pinpoint exactly what it was, but I remember at a certain point in therapy, I started using the word cult. And I started saying that I grew up in a cult, and that really changed the language change, because of course the language change really facilitated the mental change. And in that, I had started looking into, I think two of my old JW friends, one of the ones in Boston who is now out and proud, her and another friend that I had grown up with are you know, now obviously ex-JWs, and both left bitterly. You know, abuse is involved in all of that, but both, I asked them for, like, resources in regards to, like, what helped you leave. And the one was big Lloyd Evans fan. Mm-hmm. And Lloyd Evans, while great, was a bit much for me at first.
Oh, yeah. I honestly struggled when I was leaving because just a little too, for me, a little too upfront and in your face, and I couldn't handle it.
Yeah. I wasn't ready for all that. And there was, and I doubted, because apostates are the worst of the worst. And so in this, we are the worst of the worst.
Yes.
So I was like not ready for such open apostasy.
Yeah, absolutely. We needed something a little softer place to land. Yeah.
But I will say that did not stop me from consuming a number of YouTube, a number of his videos.
He's helped a tremendous amount of people. Helped me.
Yeah. I remember watching different things, and I remember what all they were, but just like different things that applying different logic to different situations, and kind of the doctrine. A lot of doctrinal things I wasn't really. I really care about, and like I said, I was like not really about studying and like reading stuff, so I don't really care about propaganda. And there was a watchtower. There was a watchtower because it was brought up on JW Facts, which I found out about later. But there was a watchtower, and I remember sitting through this watchtower, and I was still in. It was not long before I got disfellowshipped, and it was like a huge red flag for me. Not in identifying it as a cult, but just like in general. I'm over here like trying to have my power and my control over my own life. And it was very clearly that they're exerting this control. And there was a watchtower that made the point, it had the sentence that was like, the society may give direction that may not make sense one day, but go with it. And I was like, what kind of direction that doesn't make sense that I'm supposed to just go with? Is this like an Abraham Isaac situation? Like what?
Or is this a Kool-Aid situation?
Well, a Kool-Aid situation, but the thing is, they set it up so it could be a Kool-Aid situation because Jim Jones didn't exist in a vacuum. He worked his way up. So, and he started with simple sentences and language and things like that are like, trust me, I know what's best. And and so. That got me, and that was even before I was disfellowshipped. I was like, I don't think that maybe this is. I got questions, but I couldn't ask anybody. But I had questions. I had I brought even more
questions, but you can't ask your questions.
I had questions.
Inside the truth, there can be no questions.
Yep. So I was really concerned about that. Once it. Doctrinally, there were a lot of things that I wasn't really interested, lifestyle stuff, but the lifestyle stuff is really what kind of pulled me out, where it was like, I wanted this freedom. I wanted to live my life in this way. And I would often envy, both my husband, we talked about it in terms of being an atheist and not having to grow up with any kind of religious, expectations, as well as other friends and family members who were Christian or who went to church, but also just lived their life and were able to freely, love God in whatever way, and it not be such a job, it not be such a chore. Why does it have to why does faith have to be a chore? Why does it have to be such a hard job? And it was just hard being a witness. It was just fucking hard. And it was hard being an ex-witness while trying to still be a witness without the support of the other witnesses. And also with all of these fucking questions that I didn't really think I was going to get any answers to. And so I asked my ex-JW friends that I had, I looked, I started looking into some of these things, and that started breaking down some of the doctrinal stuff that I hadn't really maybe consciously been concerned about, but then, was like, well, if I'm not going to do this, I got to know, what it is that I'm not doing. I got to go back in and kind of dig through. And I want to say it was early pandemic, maybe just before, because what is time? This show on Netflix came out called Unorthodox, and it's and it was great. And I remember being so jealous of her because in that same kind of pioneering and that being taken away so that I didn't have to do it anymore, and even in being disfellowshipped, I think even a part of me, hooking up with that guy and then so quickly confessing, not just because it was what I was supposed to do, the right thing to do, but also because I wanted someone else to make a decision on my status in the congregation. I wanted someone else to tell me whether I should continue to be, whether I should keep doing this thing and, you know, if they would help me, or if I should just not, or if I could not, you know, I needed someone else to relinquish me of the responsibility, because I just did not have the strength to do it myself. And in the show, she did. And I remember being jealous of that in that moment of, I wish that I had just taken my life into my own hands. And I think,
can we stop? We've got to stop there for a second. That's a really, really good point. And I think that there's a learned helplessness that comes along with being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. This abdication of our own responsibility for our lives, this turning our lives and our decision making over to other people. And you still see a lot of times, even after people leave, people struggle to maybe they're still holding on to very toxic family who are Jehovah's Witnesses, or maybe they're hanging on to maybe, you know, a lot of people still have a hard time even saying a bad word about the cult because there's this power dynamic that's set up there. And being able to take your own power and to have your own voice, whether it's you right now speaking up for yourself on this podcast, or doing some activism, or just saying, no, like, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior anymore. Whatever that is, when you start to be able to have your own boundaries and really come into your own, that's a beautiful thing. So I'm glad that you've been able to establish some of this as you've gone by, because Jehovah's Witnesses really just rob you of that. And what was her name? Esty, I think it was, in Unorthodox. Like that was a very touching story. And that's just, I mean, that's its own really difficult path, right? And so it's great to be able to be your own advocate in life and to be able to find that for yourself. Instead of, because a lot of people have a lot of avoidance, because living as one of Jehovah's Witnesses is a life of denial. Denial of our own thoughts and feelings, denial of when we see something that doesn't add up or doesn't make sense in the belief system, I'm going to deny that. The cognitive dissonance, the pain makes us put it up on the shelf. And when you really come into your own is when you're not avoiding anymore. So and that's, I'm glad you brought that up.
For a number of years, that's what it was. It was the avoidance. It was, I'm going to live my life and just have this, like, you know, the shame in the back of my mind. I'm going to feel shame surrounding the things that I'm doing. I'm going to keep doing things. I'm going to keep hanging out with these people that are not witnesses. I'm going to keep sleeping with these shitty humans, and I'm going to keep searching for validation where I shouldn't, because I gotta find out, you know, having your identity stripped away as an adult, the only identity you've ever known, having it stripped away leads to quite a crisis of conscience.
And when you find out that identity wasn't really even an identity, it was somebody else's identity. It was never even yours. So in your 20s, you're realizing I've never even had a chance to figure out who I am or what I like or what I want.
And that is, you know, then you start moving through your grief stages. Another thing that really pushed me in terms of even acknowledging it, pushed me out of the avoidance thing, was I'm a massage therapist, and I also studied and practiced shiatsu, which is a Japanese bodywork very similar to acupuncture, minus the needles. And so one of the things that you go through in school is you learn about traditional Chinese medicine, and you learn about these elements and how these elements are how, like, the natural elements, they all have different meanings, they all have different associations. And one of the elements is metal, and it's lung and large intestine has a lot to do with moving things in and out, and as the organs do, and it has a lot to do with grief. And the time that's associated is like fall. A lot of people die in fall. It's the end of summer. You're sad. You're coming up on winter, which is like its own wasteland of
death.
Of dark, and that was something that I struggled with a lot in school as we would talk about it, because I had been grieving for a long time, and there's a type of grief called bei, B-E-I, and grief is obvious, a healthy emotion, and as a society we don't acknowledge it, but bei is in Chinese medical terms a type of when you get stuck in the grief. when you see someone whose, spouse died 15 years ago and it's still clearly, you can tell for them, it feels like it was just yesterday. And I was living in that for years. It felt like just yesterday, my entire life had been ripped away for years. And while I could like move through and do stuff, it didn't change the feeling. I was always just at least a little bit sad. And so, but probably a lot more. And so, that training, because in doing it, you have to, in being able to do shiatsu, you got to like move through the stuff, you got to acknowledge, like, things come up and you got to acknowledge it before you can start putting your hands on somebody else and helping them through it, like we were talking about before. And so that really shifted the emotional, like, you have to deal with this and you have to figure it out. And so the show helped, being in therapy for a long time helped, and talking about it, talking about being disfellowshipped, talking about other relationships, talking about all kinds of things was really helpful in moving me through it. And then when pandemic happened or began, and we were like, oh, it's just going to be 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks turned into now. And we sat around together for like 6 months, just unemployed, looking at each other and afraid to leave the house. And so that was a lot of time. And, when you're quiet, again, them idle hands, you're like, what do I do with myself? And that time was, especially like when we were unemployed, earlier last year, was a really notable time, because I finally fully dove into my shit. And it was like, okay, do you want to continue feeling any kind of shame? Do you want to continue? I felt like I was really far away from it, and I was feeling, I was very comfortable in my relationship. We had talked about it a lot. But there were still lingering things. And the more that I told, because I didn't talk about, being an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but I started talking about it and had started talking about it in the years, and talking to my friends, about my very close friends who I'd had since this happened. I started talking to people who, like, random strangers about it. And like, yes, I grew up in this cult, and like my perception of things is different. The filter still shows up sometimes in ways that I don't realize or wouldn't have thought about. And so looking more into Lloyd Evans and watching more of the videos. I've read some things on JW Facts that honestly didn't really take much. But one of the biggest to like debunk a lot of the belief system, mm-hmm. because a lot of those things, when you're not talking about them, they're not relevant to your life. When I'm not talking about 607, like, who cares? It's not information that like my soul is like, let's hold on to that. And my brain's like, we can get rid of that. But then this podcast came along, because I was like, how do I like talk to other, the lie is that when you leave that you're alone, because you are alone, because the social community that you had created is gone. And so there's that, so you're alone in that regard, but you're not actually alone in the world. And so I was afraid, obviously, for a long time. All the XJW, everything is apostate material. That's the worst. So I was afraid to look into it. And this time I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna dig into it. And this podcast was a huge help, because I love podcasts. I've been listening to podcasts since they existed. Ira Glass has been in my ear since I was 15 years old. So, and I just love a story. Obviously, I've been talking forever. I love a story. I love telling a story. I love hearing a story. So hearing other people's stories was just so much validation. My, situation was not nearly as extreme as so many others, but just in first listening to my friends' stories and learning about abuse under my own nose got me. I was like, like we said, Jehovah's Witnesses always, they pride themselves, like, like the Catholics, they're out here doing their blah, blah, blah. We would never. Blah, blah. And it's like, okay, at least the Catholics actually offer counseling and acknowledge when it happens, now that they've been caught repeatedly. They like deal with it. They actually deal with it. And y'all just sit here and push under the rug. And the thing that really solidified that I was not going back was listening to just those two friends' stories of being abused by people in the congregation. And I was like, absolutely not. And them being the ones that got in trouble. And I was like, absolutely not. I will never give my money to an organization, or my money, my time, my energy to an organization that uses my money, time, and energy to protect pedophiles. that's going to be a hard pass for me, honey. So the end. That, that was it. I was like, cool, I don't even need to read anything else. Like, I'm good. I don't have anything to do with this organization. As far as the doctrine goes, I couldn't care less about it because it doesn't make, like I said, when you don't have to spew it to other people, it's not.
Right. And it sounds like you did at least because it is important on a level to at least look into it enough to where you can be like, oh yeah, okay, I can see it's not true. Yeah. Because when you can do that, then because that's what a lot of our feelings were based on, was that this thing is true and it told us how to feel.
Yeah.
But then if we can see that it's not true either, well, that's a lie. And the way it told us to feel is a lie too.
Yeah.
And we don't need to feel that way anymore. We can start to break those things down. And I'm sorry that your friends experienced abuse. Obviously, listening to like this podcast or other stories, you see that sadly that's not as rare.
It's not rare. It's not rare at all. And the thing is, when you step back, just like in the Catholic Church, just like in any other cult situation, why would it be? Because they protect their own. You create an insular community. Like, we don't know what's going on in the Amish community, but based on these other things, we can assume it's probably the same thing. And it was, to an extent, it was the realization that it was a lie by default. Because if for years, you spent all these years defaming these other religions, defaming these other cults, saying that their belief system is wrong, the way that they execute their practices is wrong. And you take a slide away from Jehovah's Witnesses, just a little sidestep out and look in, you can clearly see the similarities between the way the Moonies do things. You see the similarities between Jim Jones. You see the similarities between Heaven's Gate. You see how they got to the Kool-Aid. That one, that's it. Like, you see all of these things and you have lived your life understanding that those were a lie. And when you see them saying the same things in the situation that you grew up in, it's like, oh, this is a lie by default. They lied. We're saying the same things. We're lying. Boom. That's it. So for me, once it came to it, it was as simple as that. It took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
But it essentially ended up as simple as that. Just like, nah, like I'm not with whatever y'all are doing. God aside, Christianity aside, I'm on issues with that whole thing. But as far as Jehovah's Witnesses go, and I also knew that if I ever, being taught that this, the Jehovah's Witnesses were the only thing, if I ever left that, I wasn't going to go to another religion. I love for so many people that they find a different kind of faith-based community that they can be about. It's not for me, but I love it for other people. I love being able to talk to people about it. I'm a religion. I'm now in college. I'm going to study religion. I'm fascinated by it as a social construct. Having lived through it, but
so now that you're awake, you're out, you're awake. Now you're married and everything as well. Congratulations on that.
Thank
you. Does your mom shun you to this day, or do you all have any relationship?
Yeah. So the last time I talked to my mom was last year. We share some things. She is on now. We're financially separate. So I do not have much to do with that. And have been for years. But she is on my phone plan. So she sends me money every month for her phone. Venmo exists, so we don't have to talk about that. We share a Netflix and Hulu account because we just always have. And that is the contact that we have. Last year, early-ish pandemic, I called her and I wrote some stuff down and asked questions. I asked, why did you start this in the first, what were you looking for? How do you feel now? All of the shit that you said really hurt me over all these years. I'm not coming back. We had a conversation. And that was probably the first time that we had spoken words to each other in years.
And so were you all able to have a real conversation around that?
We were. But it of course always comes back to why Jehovah's Witnesses are good, or why it's good to have like this Christian foundation. And while I can sit here and be like, sure, the Bible's, a fascinating book, and there's some good bits in there. I certainly don't feel the obviously the need to go back, or the need to just do anything further there. And she constantly tries to pull it back because, in her mind, which I fully understand, we were all in it, in her mind, the best thing for me is to come back, and for her to, in her job as a witness, not as my mom, because that ship has sailed, because the family has been weaponized, and this is
Absolutely.
her. These are the daggers that she is trying to throw, to remind me of how I need to come back, and why it's the best life, and why it hurts her, and she'll continue praying for me. But that's that was probably the last conversation that we had since I left Memphis. We maybe talked once before. That was like 5-6 years ago now.
Let's say, so if you could say something to her today, what would you say?
Ooh, man, I was gonna write this down. I've gone back and forth so much in therapy about, I want to write my mom a letter. I want to see her as a logical person. I want it to be as simple for her as it is for me, in regards to, don't give your money to people to protect pedophiles. Like, this is actually the organization that you're a part of. So I would say that.
Well, what would you say for, not addressing her and her life? What would you say for yourself? If you could say something to her for yourself, is there something that you would say?
God. There's a lot. Oh man, you're trying to get me all emotional up in here. Okay.
I don't know. The question was on the list. I'm not trying to ambush you. And if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to either.
No. I think I would say to my mother that I love you and I miss you, because you're my mother, and I would love for you to be my mother again. Yeah. And I would love for you to be able to do it unconditionally. I would love to have a genuine, open, unconditional, unrestrained relationship where I could call you up and, tell you about how I'm mad at somebody at work, or, I don't know. If I had a kid one day, ask a question about that, I would love the option. But, yeah. That's my message.
I mean, honestly, isn't that what we all want?
Yeah.
We all just want real unfettered relationships with our parents, where they are actually able to see, hear, and validate us, where we are able to be loved for who we are, and not just if we are a reflection of them. And sadly, for most of us, our parents can only appreciate us if we are a reflection of them.
Yeah.
My mom can be who she is. That's fine. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily ask her to. I mean, I'm not sure that if she left, I'm not sure. Just there's a lot of history and there's a lot of things that would have to be worked through there. But it would be nice to actually have. Yesterday I went to a friend's 21st birthday party. My wife and I used to clean for that family. Clean their house. My wife still does. Did till they moved. Anyway, they moved about an hour away. So we went down there and we hung out with their family. And honestly, yesterday, it was just so nice to sit out with this clearly close-knit family. Mm-hmm. We are not related to any of these people. Yeah. Okay. And these people invited us to their house out there. It was like I don't even know the relations of all of these people. How about that? And they invited us to their house, and we went out there and we sat down with these people. And I mean, just to be around a family that's all just sitting around, joking with one another, catching up with one another, how life's been over the last little bit, and getting each other a beer when they go into the house, and like, hey, anybody want anything? Yeah. And just and just accepting us with the same open arms as that they're accepting all these other people in their family.
Simple.
That it's so simple and it's beautiful. And that's what I think we all want. In fact, after we left, I was like, I think I told my wife, I think there was a time, because my parents became witnesses when I was 8. Mm-hmm. I seem to remember, my kid brain remembers a time when me and my uncles and aunts and cousins and grandparents and my parents would all get together for Thanksgiving dinner, or we would all get together for Christmas. And it wasn't even about the holiday was there for sure, and it was about that. But it was just about being around all these people, and you kind of had one another's back, and you knew if something happened to somebody, other people would step up and help them. It was its own little community, and everybody there was the inside jokes and the jokes with one another, and all this stuff. And it's just so much fun. And it's just such a shame that a particular religious belief can just obliterate all of that.
Yes.
And how in the world you can call yourselves the religion of love and obliterate all of that, that's so messed up. Yeah. And I think all you're asking for from your mom is love.
Yeah.
And I think that's all most of us are asking is, hey, it'd be nice if we could actually like truly love one another and a healthy definition of what love actually is. But love is not control. That's not loving the other person.
Exactly. I would like to be able to call her, and I would also like for us to go to therapy together. But
I know. Yeah, wouldn't that be something?
That would be a huge, that'd be a huge one. But that's what I would say to her and to everyone else that I, that. And that's what I would say to her right now, because I will also say that I oscillate, and sometimes I want to just be like, fuck you, like, how dare you steal my childhood away? I could have been anything, and you postponed my entire life for what? So I want to say that I'm angry, but I want to say that I love you, and I want us to. I would love if things were different. I would love if we could get healthy together and get into a healthy place.
Yeah. You got to feel your own feelings too, right? And anger can be one of those at times. Often underneath the anger is profound sadness.
Yeah.
And because we were robbed of a lot because of our parents' mistakes and their decisions that they then put upon us.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? Life is complex. Exactly. Relationships are complex.
Yeah, I wish that there was, like I was saying earlier, I wish that, for so many of my friends who were in these, who, grew up in my, my family, we're very Southern, mostly Baptist, and my aunt's a Black Muslim. But nonetheless, it feels like such an easy thing to do, to just have a relationship and to believe different things about God. Like we could just do that and it's fine. It would just be fine. As I was recovering, I love my husband. He has never thought about God a day in his life. And I was like, okay, cool. That's fine. That's not, that's irrelevant. Why does it have to be why does it have to be a defining factor?
Right. We were around that family yesterday. This family clearly loves one another and it's just having a blast with one another. And God was not brought up one time. And I'm pretty sure that they're religious, but I also don't have to know.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Doesn't change anything.
It's okay. So, no, you can just be good people.
Right. Unless you're some kind of extremist, like, we're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, so you have your life today. What do you love about the life that you have today? What is it that you enjoy? And is there anything that, I don't know, do you have any goals or anything that you want to engage in?
Yeah. One of the biggest differences that I have found. In pandemic, we lived in Massachusetts for a number of years, and we moved last year. We're in Chicago now. And one of the things that I one of the frustrations that I grew up with was moving around to different places and going to like starting in different schools and putting yourself out there, right? And it's much easier to make friends in school or in work or in these quote unquote worldly situations for some reason than it is to make with people in the congregation. Obviously, because everyone has a guard up to be like, are you like, what's your level of spirituality, quote unquote? So so one of the things that I have, learned has been to be able to put myself out there and to be accepted. And that has been very true of our move here is putting myself out there. And during a pandemic, it's even harder. And so that has been both a challenge and a mixed bag of challenge and joy. But I've been enjoying doing it and seeing I was thinking about it last night, just seeing the benefits. Like I hung out with a friend last night for a while and helped her look at apartments and, met another friend. And it's just so much easier to interact with people when you don't have this extra factor. You can just be like, hi, do you like fries? I like fries. Let's be friends now. Like it's very, it can be like very 5-year-old. It's not a, have you read this month's magazines? And have you like, do you last time you gave a talk? And how many hours are you getting in service? There's no grilling. It's just like, you get what you get and you're good with it because that's what people have. So that's the honesty and the genuineness and the comfort with it, the not having to look over my shoulders. And if I have a question, I can fucking ask it. And I do. And that's great. So yeah, the honesty, the freedom, the genuine freedom, my independent spirit is celebrated on this side of the cult, as opposed to as opposed to the attempts at suppressing it, which I was clearly not good at. So that's been great. My husband, I got married in June, which was last month. No, it was 2 months ago now. God, I've been married for just over 2 months, and that's going well. Just put together my wedding gown the other day, and I just keep staring at the pictures, and they're cute.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's been a good time to find someone that I can be genuine, that I can sit here and tell the story to, and that doesn't look at me crazy and that doesn't question it and is 100% on my side all the time. Obviously we argue about things, but it's definitely.
Yeah, you're not another cult.
Yeah, no, we're not a little house cult. No. I'm no longer the co-leader of my own life. But yeah, having found a genuineness in relationships that I know that I'll have for the rest of my life, that are not conditional, that I can, shy of killing them or their children. I'm like, there's no reason for us to, for that to end. So that is a huge difference and something that I am infinitely grateful for, to have built the community that I have, and to, be in a new place and build a new one, and know that I can do that, and that it will never be as hard as trying to get in with the CrossFit Jesus people. Still don't do CrossFit. I'm not going to start.
There's actually, you were talking about making friends a minute ago, and I had to get on my phone real quick because there's something I wrote down. I was watching a TV show one day, and it was about a little girl making friends. And what I wrote down is, I like you. I want to spend time with you. Come to my birthday party. So I like you. I want to spend time with you. Come to my birthday party. That's how 6-year-olds make friends. And honestly, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. It's like, hey, I like to run. You like to run. Would you like to run together?
Yeah.
You need an apartment. I've lived in apartments and looked for apartments. Can I help you look for an apartment?
Yeah.
It's just, we're all just people. You like fries. I like fries. Let's go eat fries.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything more difficult than it is, because let's face it, life is already hard. Being a human person is already a task and a half. So why are we making it any more difficult? Like, there's no reason.
People out there in the world are just as lonely as a lot of us ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. We just have to reach out and be, but it's not as easy as that. Let's allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Our vulnerability has been exploited in the past.
Yeah.
There's a lot to work through there, but There are, but we can just make friends. I just went to a, like I said, 21st birthday party. I went and ate sandwiches and cake, and it was a birthday party. It wasn't like anything more complicated than that.
No one's head got cut off. No one got killed.
There was
Everything.
a pool. People were in the pool. Ooh. There was music playing.
The dangers of a pool.
Yeah, the 21-year-old kid opened his presents, and it was fun, and it was just a good time. It was just like, how is that? That's really, if you think about it, it's not that much different than going to like a wedding shower or something as a witness. People are just gathering around something that we all share as human beings, and giving some gifts and eating some food and talking and catching up.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be anything.
Nobody was laying there with a needle in their arm and a bottle of booze next to them. And, it wasn't, obviously that can exist in the world at large. That can exist in the congregation too. So
and it does, but it's like, that's not the only reality.
It's not. It's not.
It's not most people's reality. Yeah. Actually, most people are not walking around with needles in their arms or other things. So I really enjoyed the freedom and the realization that people are people.
Yep.
That's it. And it can really be as simple as that. So there's that. I like being married to my human. We started. I'm in college. I've started school, which is something that I have, in a number of ways, always wanted to do. Didn't know what I wanted to do, but I am a sociology major at the moment because I'm fascinated with how social groups define people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder why.
I am. Because of course I am. And so I'm studying that and taking it into a medical context because I'm particularly interested in how people's social groups define their medical choices. I've never had to deal with the blood issue up close, but I fully recognize the problem that the the organization has in relation to it, where they can literally never go back because you've murdered a shit ton of kids now. And while there's no reason to not take blood, you got to hold on to acts.
Oh, they're committed now.
Yeah, you're in it. You can't do anything about it now. You can't go back. People be mad. You lose all your people. You lose lots of people already, but you lose even more. So.
Tried real hard with this whole blood fractions thing to dance around it as much as they can.
Okay, guys.
Yeah,
I can take a piece of blood, but not all the blood. All right.
Yeah, if we're gonna be word literal about what the Bible says, then be word literal.
Exactly.
And if not, then I hope you quit disfellowshipping people for sex fractions, because people are having sex fractions all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So, fractional things is now a thing, and we can start drawing lines in other places. Then let's be sure to do that.
Exactly. You make accommodations. Let's make all the accommodations. You want to make it black and white. Go ahead and make it black and white. But if you're gonna have a shade of gray, you better understand it's a spectrum now. We're moving into we're moving out of cult territory into religion territory.
Oh yeah. You got a lot, so you've got a whole buffet of things to study as you start to get into this, and that's awesome. Anything else that you're hoping for or wanting to get into?
My goal with it is to help end really healthcare inequality, largely for or to deal with it largely for BIPOC women, Black, Indigenous people of color, in case people don't know about the lingo. Because with so many things socially, I think women are obviously very disproportionately affected. Black and brown women are, because I became, I went from being one of Jehovah's Witnesses to being a Black woman, and I was like, oh shit, that's not. It's better, but it's also hard. So I've been working through a lot of that as well. Working with a lot of that as well. Gonna work with the ladies, and just I don't know, big goal, my ambition still exists. I'm going to be a boss lady one day for sure. I'm going to walk around in heels and be worth money, because it's not a bad thing. As I have started to accept, that whole Simple Life thing, they really get you. That like, if you ain't struggling, you ain't doing it right. Mm-hmm. And that's also dumb. So, so yeah, just whatever my own versions of success are, I look forward to continuing to define that and to change it as I see fit.
And there you go. I think that's a good way to end. Now you get to be yourself, and exactly. you get to now your ambition can be appreciated and it can pay off. Now you can have people in your life who care about you for you. And I appreciate you sharing your story today, because it will help somebody else out there who's been through similar things to feel less misunderstood. Or maybe there's somebody else out there who's like, yeah, I'm ambitious too. You know what I'm saying? And let's go get something out there. It's out there to be had.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Everybody go get your money, y'all. Go get paid.
I'll leave this and go get your money, y'all. All right, Nia. Well, take care. I appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.